What's up, Redemption? How you doing? John Hendricks here, as always, for the Threshing Floor podcast. This is episode number 60, and we finally were able to sit down and do the episode with Mr. Travis Brown. So hopefully you guys are as excited about that as we are to bring it to you. Now, this episode did run a little bit longer than I anticipated. So with that, we are not doing the recent news section that we normally do at the beginning. We're just going to get right into the conversation this week, and we'll pick it back up next week going over the recent happenings in the community. Glad you're here. We'll jump right into it. All right, guys, we are here with the legendary Mr. Travis Brown. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. I feel like a relic.
Well, I mean, I guess there are some people in the community that, I'll put it this way. There was someone, because I asked the community if there was any specific questions they wanted me to make sure that I asked you since I was doing the episode. And someone was like, I guess this is a guy from way back when.
Yeah.
So
yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
I guess if we do a good job, then maybe they'll have some context. And that's kind of what I wanted to have you on for. So
that's fantastic.
I guess we'll just kind of get right into it. You want to, for the people that are much like myself, came into the game after you were stepping away, you want to kind of just give a brief overview of who you are as a person and just go from there?
Yeah. Well, my name is James Travis Brown. I have a J name as well. I know you've had some guests where you have some camaraderie because of that. I grew up in Southwest Missouri. Moved to Ohio, where I met my wife, Sarah, and where we became a family. Had two boys, adopted son, Ethan, and then lo and behold, we're able to have a second son, Dylan. And so I've been playing Redemption. I started playing in, I would say, 2000. I am a youth minister. I've been a youth minister for about that long as well, so about 25 years. Been doing youth ministry. I love Jesus. I love gamers. And so Redemption was just kind of one of those obvious duh moments for me. Like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've been serving in the Church of Christ for all of those years. Served in Ohio and then at the same place for, 12 years and then maybe longer. And then moved to Texas. Felt like God was calling us to go south. And got to Houston just before Hurricane Harvey. So we hit the ground running serving, and it's been a joy. It was pretty cool when we moved to Texas. Roy had moved from New York and had relocated to San Antonio, and so immediately I had a connection with Roy there as far as the Redemption family goes, and started a play group, and really just have a passion for gamers, have a passion for community. That's really what I love about the game more than anything is the community that it fosters. And I just recently, I did step away. And one of the big reasons I stepped away from the game was needed to focus on education. I was going back to school for my master's, and I just graduated this month with a master's in Christian ministry. So
that's awesome news.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
You said you moved down to Texas about the same time that Roy did. So you had the cool intersection of having that community that you mentioned that the game fosters.
Yeah.
Kind of intersect with that.
Yes.
So how did it go with you and Roy coming down and starting? Because shortly after that, there was a Nationals hosted.
Correct.
In Texas, right? So, I mean, it seems like you hit the ground running and then boom. All right, play group developed. Here we're hosting a Nationals in Texas. And then there's already been another Nationals in Texas. There was one in 2021, which was my first one. So
yeah, and I really regret not going to that, honestly, with it being so close and Roy being the driving force. Roy is a force. Just
that is one way to put it.
he is absolutely a force of nature, and I love that guy so much. But yeah, he was very much an encourager. My first meeting with him was After Hurricane Harvey, he and a friend of his came over and were serving, just coming to help muck out houses and we ended up on top of a roof down in Pasadena trying to help a lady patch her roof. I'll never forget that day. But yeah, I mean, we did hit the ground running. We started a play group. The first time I really had a senior minister who saw the game and was like, "Oh, that's really cool." And so like the senior minister and the youth minister were playing the game, and we were encouraging the kids to play, and we were encouraging dads to get involved and play. And yeah, I think it was about a year later that we hosted the Nationals in Texas.
Cool. So I guess you've been able to see it from the ministry side as well. So what was it like trying to balance your involvement with the game and then also your ministry? And then do you enjoy the aspect of the game? I know it's kind of one of those topics that people talk about. They're always like, there's ministry potential for the game if you use it that way. It's kind of what you make it instead of.
It is.
You can't just say it's a ministry tool. Hey, somebody come and it's going to do it automatically. Like you have to engage and make it that. But Absolutely. What do you think the game, as far as having a role in ministry, is?
I think it can do one of two things. It can be something that you use to get outside of the building and get into game stores and play in front of people. People love asking about other games that they see people playing. They love hearing about them, but then you have the opportunity to ask them about theirs, and you automatically have some kind of common ground there. Or you can use the game in such a way that you kind of keep the salt in the shaker. You turn it into like an ingrown, like instead of going out and being in a game shop, we're going to stay inside of our church building. We're going to play this game, which there might be a place for that, but I struggled with that because it would become like another dividing wall between me and other people. It would get me away from people who need Jesus. And so we and I'm talking in a kind of a royal sense, myself and my play group, we tried to be not always at our building. We tried to be in local game shops. I mean, this is how I came about owning Gym City Games, which was a brick and mortar store that I owned in Dayton, Ohio, prior to owning Three Lions. Was we were at a store and we were playing the game and we were introducing people to the game, built relationships with the folks that worked there. And the store owner eventually, he was one of those guys that owned a store back when baseball cards were a big deal. And he loved that side of it. And he just didn't really love like the collectible card game side of it, which is where you really had to go if you were wanting to stay in business at that point.
Yeah.
But he saw that I loved that, and he saw that I loved the people, and he made a really, really awesome offer to me that didn't require much of me at all. I was a minister. Most ministers don't just have liquid funds laying around to be able to buy a business. But he offered it to me in such a way that I would pay him a little bit as we go, and I would be able to take the money that I earned from the business to pay him. And so I ended up owning a business without really giving him anything out of pocket. But it was all an opportunity that was opened up just by being outside of the building and using the game in a way as a tool to build relationships. And the game, I mean, the reality is it's a really good game. Like, it's a quality game. It's not like there's so many things. And yes, early on, it was a cheesy Christian knockoff. Let's be honest.
At least you said it.
It was, but it has become there's such depth and richness in the game, such incredible strategy opportunities that it's really a good game. And I've had guys that played the other games, Magic, played Pokemon, played Yu-Gi-Oh, played all the other games that don't really exist any longer, and said, this game is so good. Like, there's so many different ways you can go with it. And so it's not like we're taking an inferior product out. I think what Rob and the design team have continued to do is just phenomenal. I mean, it's incredible what they continue to do. I love it.
Yeah. Speaking of that, like when I came into the game, I was introduced by my buddy who is the youth pastor at our church, coincidentally enough. And so he's got, a little bit of a background with it. He touched it a little bit early on in his youth, as he says, in the late 90s. And then it was that cheesy Christian knockoff. His parents got it because, hey, here's a Christian version of Pokemon. Play this, son. Don't play the other one. And
Christian Pokemon.
Yeah, had a shoebox full of cards or whatever. Put them away. I think he said most of the cards were his brother's. I guess where they buy to share, but then the older brother claims or whatever. So had that scenario, and then he was like, "Hey, I saw this. I went in Lifeway because it was going out of business here locally, and we got into the game that way." And the first packs that I opened, actual booster packs, were Angel Wars. So that's always a running joke for me because I'm like, I hated that. I hated everything about it. Like literally, there was nothing positive from Angel Wars opening those booster packs. But we stuck with it because we opened the IJ starter decks and we saw that there was an updated card face. And it was like, okay, it seems like they're getting more modern. Then we found out there's a reserve, and that added another strategy, another layer of strategy, and just compounding onto that. But really the way that you mentioned, you can go a million different ways. When you sit down with your collection, you want to build a deck. You can build a deck to do several different things that are going to help you get to the win condition that not a lot of other card games offer. So I definitely think the depth of strategy is there for sharing it outside of church events and trying to use it as a tool. And that's the thing is, not to get on this tangent here early on, because I've got a ton of questions, but just to say, my pastor that I grew up with, I loved that guy to death. And some of the things he taught me were that you're not always when you talk to someone, you may not be what leads them to Jesus, but you may be part of the overall story. And he told us about there's a scale, and at this certain point in the scale, so it's a -5 to 5. 0 is where they decided they want to accept Jesus. And then they start developing the discipleship on the other side of that. They may be at a -4. You may interact with them, move them to a -3. You had a part in that story, but you didn't get them there. And then other encounters in life can move them that way. And so the game, you may not sit down with somebody and they see it and they're like, okay, immediately, this game's about the Bible. I want to give my heart to Jesus.
Right. Yeah.
But they may sit down and be like, I was an atheist and I don't believe half the stuff in the Bible. It's mostly just a record of history, but this is really cool. And now I'm going to play this game. And constantly there's just, I guess you pick up on it without meaning to. Yeah. And just being around that can move that scale for certain people. So I think that's where I think the role of ministry with the game is, personally.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned that you stepped away to go and further your education, work on getting your master's. So what was that decision like? Because you were pretty heavily involved at the time that you stepped away.
Yeah, gotten pretty deep in. I mean, not nearly in the depth of guys like Gabe and RDT and John. Sorry.
Yeah.
RDT, Red Dragonthorn, John, or the Allstads, or not nearly as deep as they were. I don't know. I kind of felt as though I was involved in that team because I had such a vested interest in the success of the game. Being an owner of TLG and having had kind of a history with the game and building relationships with Rob and those guys, I think there was it was pretty difficult to kind of go, okay, I need to focus on what I'm doing right now with education. And so we had moved to Texas, and I basically approached the eldership at the church that I serve at, Spring Creek Church of Christ in Tomball, Texas. And I said, guys, I really would love to get back in the classroom. It's been a long time since I've finished my undergrad. I would love to try to pursue a graduate degree. And they were very supportive of that and offered to get me through that as part of, my being employed there. And so I jumped at the opportunity. It was difficult because we were in the middle of, we were kind of coming to the end of a design. I forget what set it was at the time, but we were getting to that point, and I was just like, I needed to make the decision. We had just moved. We had our youngest had just turned 1 when we moved here. And so everything was kind of up in the air. And so I just made the decision to step away. And it wasn't just a stepping away from my involvement with the Elder team or the card design team, but it was also, I had to figure out what it was going to look like with TLG going forward, because I wasn't going to be able to continue to commit as much time as I was. And so that actually played into the sale of Three Lions as well, back to Ken, who I had originally purchased it from 3 years prior. So it was a difficult decision, but it was one that I needed to make. I do not regret it at all from that side of it. What I do regret is things like, Nationals being close and not making the effort. And, there's conflicts, there's schedules, there's always reasons you can give for not, but it's the community that I miss the most, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I wanted to ask was in all the time away, like, what is the thing that you miss most? And it's funny because every time I talk to someone, like previously I've had another one of these kind of episodes, someone that's away that gets mentioned a lot, that listeners and people that are new to the game don't necessarily have the context of them and their impact on the game.
Right.
But I had Josiah on, and he stepped away around.
My dude Josiah, yes.
Yeah, he stepped away around right after, I guess, the 2020 Nationals that was in Maryland that got wrecked with COVID.
Okay.
So he stepped away, and so everyone talks about him, especially on the competitive side. They're like, dude, if Josiah was involved right now, and they always talk about, the way he would build decks and make the right meta calls. And he was just always in the right spot.
Yeah.
As far as like thinking about the game and the meta and whatever.
Accurate.
So a lot of people talk about that, but then us new guys that, like, I came in 2019, I didn't go to that Nationals in 2020 because of the whole COVID. So I have no context really of who Josiah is as a person. I've never gotten to meet him. I don't have much context for you except for what people have said. And, if you go and dig, you can find it. But I wanted to make sure that, people that have had an impact on the game, we kind of highlight. And that's what I wanted to do. But, it's kind of like the community side of it is such a driving force for the game, and it's, lure for people that are involved with it, to where that was one of the things he said he missed the most was the community thing. And you really can't get away with it. Anybody you talk to, it comes back to that. So
absolutely.
You've been around knowing that you owned a brick and mortar game store. Everybody says it's super unique to this game, the type of environment that it fosters within its community. But how different is that from other card games you've experienced it? Boots on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, other card games, there is community, and I don't want to discount that. I don't want to say that there's not. And I don't know that it's different in the sense that it's a community that if the game went away, it would still exist. Whereas with other games, that probably isn't the case. Now, there are pockets of folks, especially, as you get into, so there's a brick and mortar store that I'm involved with now in Tomball that I've become part owner somehow because I've gone and served. I'm like a serial game store involvement person, I guess.
I have a buddy that collects cars that way that just need a little bit of fixing up. And you just get card game stores that need fixing up, huh?
Yeah. Well, but this game store is not. I mean, this game store is just incredible. It's a community of people, but the community is tenuous and really relies on the game itself. Whereas with Redemption, like I said, I honestly think that the Redemption is what is the catalyst for the beginning of the community. But I think if the game, for some reason, just ceased to exist, all of a sudden it wasn't there any longer, I would still want to call and talk to Jay Chambers. I would still want to have a conversation with John. Both of them. The John McAleeshan, and, it's like I still would want that. So that's really kind of what like the game store that I owned in Ohio, Gym City, was, we had that same kind of community, but there's just, I mean, Jesus is what makes it different, clearly.
Yeah. I guess it just lets you build the deeper relationships that would exist without.
It's tempered with forgiveness.
That's a big part too.
Yeah. Like we can have a disagreement and we can get frustrated at each other while we're playing a game, but we're not going to walk away and never talk to each other again. And I've seen that happen. I've been at a nationals where people got heated and got upset. But when it was all said and done, we're still brothers in Christ. We're still sisters in Christ. Let's go get dinner.
Yeah. Yeah, and we all like to eat.
That's accurate as well. Yeah.
Well, I guess, have you kept up with the game in any capacity while you've been away? Have you been following it at all?
Not until you reached out to me a few days ago.
Oh, and now you've done your research a little bit.
Yeah, I kind of dove in and was like, oh my goodness, like, man, the token thing seems to have taken off. The making booster draft 2-player seems to have grabbed a hold. I mean, there's some cool stuff that's happening with the cards, the whole Roots thing, the
Yep.
fundraiser, which seems to be completely funded now.
Yep.
If I'm looking at it correctly.
Yeah, the 18 was the goal for getting all of the cards in the set.
And obviously, people can still buy stuff, but
Rob said that if we kept it open and raised more money, then it could go for extra, like additional advertising or actual packaging, because now he's still packaging in old packaging. Stuff like that
yes.
that makes the game clean and fresh if somebody opens a booster box. No old cards, no old packaging would be fantastic.
Yes, it would. Absolutely. But you got to love the fact that Rob was innovative and found ways to use what he had. God love him, man. He's a trooper.
Yeah. I got to meet him at Nationals last year. Got to go out to dinner with him and talk to him. A lot of other people were there, and just getting to see the way that he interacts with a large group of people and seeing the dynamic and how much he actually cares about the game and its players. And like you said, he's had to bob and weave to keep that thing afloat all these years at different points. But I think the game's in a really good spot with all of the decisions that he's made and leadership has made and the new sets. I think it's in a really good spot moving forward.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I'm really, really excited for what's to come.
Yeah, a lot farther advanced than your cheesy, just Christian knockoff version, right?
Yeah. We're a far cry from Angel Wars.
Yeah, that's good to know.
But I'm assuming you have your play set of Q.
I do not. I don't. I tell you what, man, the only card in Angel Wars that I have, and it's kind of a troll move, is at Mr. Classic. I made like a framed Michael from the, people call it the Buzz Lightyear Michael from Angel Wars. I put it in a little plastic frame and put it on a chain like Logan Paul when he had his Charizard.
Nice.
And I wore that. And I was hoping that Rob would make it, but he ended up not being able to make it. I was going to get him to sign it, like open the case and have him sign it.
That would be incredible.
All the trolling that you can do with that. But I do not have my playset of Q, but there is a community vote for 3 cards that are going to get added to the root set before it goes to print. And Q was one of the ones that was mentioned, so
they might surprise me.
They might end up having to find a way to bring that back into the game. So I might be able to get a new version of it.
Yes, that's right. It's going to be a meme.
Yeah, it's definitely meme level. So I guess the next question here is kind of getting into kind of what all impacts that you had on the game. So after doing my research and stuff, and that's, I told you I was going to send these questions over and I had them mostly done. And then I reached out to Gabe and I asked him, I was like, hey, is there any more you could tell me? Because I wanted to make sure that I captured, the essence of your impact on the game. And I didn't know what all you had done as far as, on the card design side and, in leadership. I knew about you owning Three Lions Gaming because that's easy to track down within the community. If you do your research and you just ask around. But some of the other nuanced stuff that you have to know or have been involved at the time in order to, I guess, understand and know what all would be attributed to you and your impact on the game. And I don't want to build it up to where it's bigger than it is, but also I want to make sure that it's an episode featuring you and I want to show you respect for what all you've done for the game to keep it moving forward. But what all hats did you wear in your time? I know that obviously you go from being a player to being owner of Three Lions Gaming, I found out that you were on the Elder team and you had an impact there. You hosted multiple national tournaments. So what was your role in the game if you were to try to put it in context?
Honestly, like whenever I read through your list of stuff, I was just like, I did that. I did that. Like I was genuinely like, okay. I guess I didn't really think about what I was doing as being all that impactful as far as, at the moment. I just looked at it as, what can I do to help the game be better? What can I do? And so pretty much anytime I was asked, hey, do you want to be a part of this? I would prayerfully consider it, but really desire to jump in and be a part of it. So like when I was asked to be a moderator on the boards, sure, love to. I didn't really have a good grasp. I don't think I've ever been like the best of whatever it was I was doing. I was just trying to learn on the job. Being a card designer, I would jump in and kind of, looking at the guys that are already there and going, these guys have they've been designing for a long time. They've been creating. And so basically I felt like I just came in and from that side of it, I just offered a different perspective, like a weird perspective, maybe like, why don't we try this? And I can guarantee you that of the things that you highlighted that were maybe an impactful thing to the game itself, there were probably 100 other things that I was like, how about this? How about this? How about this? How about this? And thank God that there are guys like Gabe who are solid and can go, that's weird. Don't worry about it. And I feel as though any other hat that as a tournament host, tried to do that the best we could. We tried to do things like, we did the first live stream of a nationals at my first nationals tournament, which was in Ohio, live streaming like the feature table, whatever the higher level tables were, and had a lot of help from the community. Like I didn't walk in with like, hey guys, I know how to do this. I'm like, hey guys, here's an idea I have. Does anybody have any clue how to do this? And then lo and behold, God put the right people there at the right time and said, yeah, here, I can do this. I can do this. I can set this up. I can get the, your streaming platform set up. This is how you set up a webcam. This is how you do this. Being the owner of Three Lions Gaming was an incredible experience because it gave me an opportunity to try to maybe shift the way we understood market and how it worked with collectible card games and how, if something was selling, that it probably should be more expensive. And if something was sitting there forever, it should probably start going down in price. And that's really hard to do. It takes a lot of effort to do that. And so I wasn't trying to do things the easy way. I was trying to find ways to do things that made sense and would work. And the biggest thing was I was willing to fail. So, lots of ideas thrown against the wall with very few of them actually sticking. But the ones that did, I think, were actually kind of cool and they kind of help.
What's that quote? Thomas Edison didn't fail that many times. He just found that many ways not to make a light bulb.
Yeah, that's how it doesn't work. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You found all those ways to not do those things to get the few impactful. And I say few, I don't want to shortchange it, but I've highlighted a handful of things that truly are impactful on the game. And for all of those, like you obviously have the context of your experience to know that, yeah, for that good idea, I had a million bad ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's all I do in real life. If we're going to be honest, like at my job, they tell me I'm the manager there. I'm just throwing stuff at the wall to see what's going to stick. So absolutely. I definitely get that. But I guess I kind of skipped over this in my list of questions here. Got ahead of myself. But as a player, I know that I was told as a player you played some crazy decks. You had some weird tendencies when it came to deck building.
Oh yeah.
So what can you tell us about your time as a player before we get into some of the other hats that you wore? Like what was your favorite maybe format or time period in the game of, like this set released and this meta is what I really liked playing or something like that?
Yeah. Probably my favorite kind of play would be Booster Draft. I love Booster Draft just because of how unknown it is. You have to kind of think on your feet and do well to do that. The other side of that is I like to build. I'm not a big Type 2 player. I definitely don't play multiplayer. Multiplayer really annoys me.
See, I was afraid you were going to say that was your favorite play style.
No, I absolutely cannot stand. Well, mainly because there are people who have philosophies and they do not divert from that philosophy when they're playing, even though it makes more sense gameplay wise to do something different. Like there's a man that I love dearly.
Justin Alstead?
No, his name is Alan. His name is Alan. He was a dad who came and brought his daughter and was involved in a lot of our events. But he would play multiplayer, and his philosophy was, if you come at me, I'm going to block you with everything that I have. Well, but the next guy has 4 lost souls. I don't care. If you come at me, I'm blocking you with everything that I have. And so he would, and then the guy who had 4 would go in against him the next turn and
just
win.
Walk in.
Yeah. So, yeah, I can't do more. Anyway.
He didn't play by first one is free though, right?
No, yeah, absolutely. The first one is free, but he wouldn't do that. He would, he would go, no, there are no free passes. You can't get to 5 if you don't have 1.
That's accurate.
Which this is true, yeah. But Type 1 was my favorite. And as soon as they set a deck limit, like what is it, like 140, 150 something, and there was, I forget what it is.
Yeah, it's something up there.
Yeah, but then they had the Gates of Hell Disciples deck, where you could just discard the bottom of your deck whenever you wanted to.
Yeah, basically like infinitely to get your evil stuff.
Yeah, so I was at Nationals in Boston. This was the Nationals where they did create your own card, where you were the card. They took a picture of you.
I've seen those.
Yeah, so I got every one of them. I got one of each brigade you could get. So I was playing me. No, I wasn't. I don't think I ever actually played them in a deck. But I remember that Nationals because I had 2 decks. I had my serious deck, the one I thought could do well, maybe. But I've never been that great of a player. But I always have fun. And I said to myself, and several of the guys that are with me, I said, look, if the wheels come off, if I'm like 3rd round and I'm 0-3, the Gates of Hell deck is coming out. And so I sit down across from this poor kid. He's an RLK. Never met him from anywhere before. Sat down, and I set this 100 and some odd card deck down in front of him, and he goes, I think you're confused. This is Type 1. And I said, I'm not confused. This is my Type 1 deck.
You don't even want to see my Type 2.
Yeah. My Type 2 deck is crazy. 250. Anyway. No, I like building weird decks. One of the decks that kind of stands out in my mind was a deck I called my Vitamin E deck. Every card had a scripture reference from a book that started with the letter E.
Okay. So
it wasn't good.
I was going to say that was the fun deck, right?
It was but that's the thing is like I don't know that I ever like even my deck I thought might win was kind of a weird, like, quirky deck. It wasn't really good. It was something I wanted to see if I could get it to work. And so I honestly just had fun. Like, the times where I didn't like the game the most was the times I took it the most seriously. And I didn't like it. I didn't like myself. So I decided I was just going to have fun. I was going to play. And that's what I did. I made weird, quirky, dumb decks, and had a blast playing them.
Yeah, as long as you're having fun, I guess it doesn't matter if you're having the level of success. Because I too get what you're saying. As far as when you try to take it too serious and then you don't have success, it's like you've left something out there like you didn't do well to where like the experience is like half-hearted. Because you're disappointed in it. But if you just go out there and you're just trying to have fun, you can have fun winning or losing or whatever. And the context really matters, especially in a game like this to where there is so many different strategies. You can't have a deck that answers every threat.
No,
there's no way. The game is not I know that they mentioned trying to get it back to more of a kind of a rock paper scissors type meta or whatever, to where this deck
Right.
is good against this but weak against that. But you can
Yeah.
never truly limit yourself to like I'm not exposed to anything. So
It's so hard to balance it like that.
yeah.
And inevitably, you're going to come up against a guy like JD at a Nationals where you're everything's discarded. You have 3 cards in your hand. You can't do anything with it.
Yeah, that sounds that sounds about right.
That's this is going to happen.
I build crazy decks. I'm not that good of a player, and believe me, we share the same burden there. Like I enjoy being involved with the game, but I don't think anyone would ever call me a good player or a great player. So that's fine. But what was that journey like from that guy that built the crazy decks and was just having fun to each level of the depth that you grew to as far as your involvement with the game? So you start off with a player or as a player, and then I guess you move into hosting tournaments, trying to build a play group. Now you own Three Lions Gaming. Now you're involved with leadership. But what was like each step of that progression like?
So it was. I feel like it was a progression through trust. What I felt at each level was that. So when I started playing, like the first tournament I went to, I'll never forget. It was at a pizza place in Cincinnati. I'm trying to remember who the host was.
He had you at pizza, didn't he?
Well, it was funny because it was like before they were going to be open. I think he worked there.
Oh, gotcha.
And my brain, he's going to listen to this podcast and go, how can you not remember my name? There's a lot I don't remember anymore. But going there and, realizing that we were absolutely not playing the game correctly.
Yeah, there you go.
Like we didn't really understand it. And then, going to becoming a tournament host and having people come to the tournament and tell me that I wasn't playing it correctly still, learning from the people that were coming to the tournaments. Like, again, it was really an experimentation process. It was me having a willingness to step out and go, okay, let's try it, without really feeling like I knew exactly what I was doing. And so that was those first two, kind of going from player to tournament host. And, you obviously gain some wisdom and you gain some understanding of how things work as you do that. Learned a lot from Stephen Schaefer, who was in Ohio. Actually kind of co-hosted a Nationals unofficially prior to the one I actually hosted. This was one that was in Columbus, Ohio, with Stephen Schaefer, and learned a lot from him there. Really just kind of getting to know people, understand, kind of listen to what they're saying, learn from them. And so I think the reason that I progressed beyond the tournament host and as a player was that I was willing to kind of listen and learn and put myself in a place where I could, be built up and taught. And so, like when I bought Three Lions Gaming, so I had owned the store before, owned it for 3 years, sold it, and I had discussions with Ken about buying Three Lions prior to that, and we just never could come to a place where we could agree on terms. And then I sold Gym City and went to him and said, look, I've got some money from the sale of this business. I would really like to, make one more run at owning Three Lions. And we were able to make a deal. And so again, it was one of those places where I felt like I was being trusted with something. Because really, Three Lions is one of those kind of stalwart, it's kind of like Covenant Games. And this is to not diss Derek or Your Turn Games or any of that. I love Derek. I think he's doing a good thing. I think having competition in the redemption space is really super healthy for the game. But I feel like it was a trust thing that Ken was willing to kind of pass on the torch of something that was owned by Doug Gray, one of the original OG creators of the game. And then to be able to kind of carry that baton, the trust there from being able to do that. And I guess people seeing that I was trying to build the brand and trying to be innovative with the products we were offering, to the swag that we were trying to produce. Just, again, it was a trust thing. I feel like I was just being trusted with a little bit more. And so in being invited into the leadership team, I wasn't immediately like, and never was like in charge of anything. I was a voice that helped to kind of nudge in different directions. And again, like I was saying earlier, like a bunch of different things I'm just throwing out there and like, what if we did this? What if we did that? I was kind of the what if guy. And then I feel like those places where those things stuck were places where there was some trust. And so I feel like each time it was trust being given or granted or applied, if that makes any sense at all.
That makes perfect sense. And I guess it speaks to kind of the character that I guess I have heard that you have. Obviously, I don't know that from my own experience dealing with you, but you do have a really strong reputation within the game of being the guy that would have taken that trust and made sure that you cherished it and handled it the right way and tried to do things in the right manner. And I definitely think that part of that is probably why you have such a strong impact to where, like, when I ask certain people about who's the coolest person that's ever been in the game or something like that, like your name has come up a few times with stuff like that. And just like, I'm from Alabama, so that gives me access to Jay and Jeremy Chambers.
Perfect.
To where they were like, dude, if you had played just a little bit before you got into the game, you would have loved Travis because of this and this. And I've heard all kinds of stories. Jay still tells me that to this day, like that first Nationals that you hosted, 2016, was absolutely the best Nationals experience that he's had. And he thinks it's the best Nationals ever.
Oh, it was so much fun.
So, I mean, just hearing you talk about it and like the way that you take it as serious as like they would have trusted you putting you in those positions, it makes perfect sense knowing what your reputation is with players that are still in the game. Has
he told you about the commentary room?
I have not heard directly about a commentary room.
So we had the table that was being streamed, and in the youth room I had a projector, and where we basically created a stadium where we could watch the main table from an somewhat isolated location. And we actually had people, including Jay. Jay was one of the people that did it, who were doing running commentary, like play by play. Yeah. Like, I felt like we were watching like a professional Magic tournament. Have you ever watched any of those before? Yeah. But it felt just like that, except way better, because like there were so many inside jokes and like things that were redemption specific that were just incredible. That was such a good energy that year. You mentioning that and talking about your impact on the game, and I'm sure that this comes from that experience, but we did something similar to that earlier in the spring, where the games had a rotation to where cards just on that new card face from IJ forward are what's illegal. Which is awesome. It is awesome. It is honestly, knowing that was going to come down the way is what made me stick with the game, because trying to learn all of those old cards and the wording on them, it makes everything difficult to get in and try to introduce new people to it. So I was looking forward as a new player to the game, like not having the nostalgia of those old cards. Jay wanted to do something. Him and Jeremy wanted to do something to give kind of life to some of those old cards and bring that nostalgic factor to it. So they had a Mr. Classic tournament, which was an unofficial tournament, but had 8 of the top players in the history of the game that were still active and willing to play come in and do a tournament type thing. And myself and Josh Potratz did the play-by-play, if you will. Yes. And we did the whole like setup at Chris's church in Knoxville, to where they were downstairs playing and we were upstairs in the youth area with it on the projector and whatnot. So, I mean, there you go. Like, that sounds like it stems from your influence, maybe. Oh man, that's so good. I love awesome. That. Now, you haven't been in the game. The person that won the tournament was Jaden Alstead. Of course. So, Jaden is one of the best players in the game right now, but the you don't have to say right now. Okay. You can just say one of the best players in the game. Okay. But he won a legit redemption branded like wrestling title belt. Like metal and everything. That is awesome. His fear was that because he's so skinny that it wouldn't strap around him and just fall off. But it did hold up, so. Anyway. I'd have to put it on my arm. Yeah. Wear it like a Band-Aid. Yeah. That's where I'd be at. But like so that Naruto headband. Yeah, that was pretty cool. But hearing you say that story about the commentary room, well, that influence is still around. That's I guess. So cool. I love that. But I guess
we can talk specifically about Three Lions Gaming, because I think that's one of the biggest areas that your impact on the game probably stems from, because a lot of the other things, like you were talking about the branding that you were trying to do with stuff, having the play mats and all that, the swag, a lot of that came from having Three Lions Gaming and putting that brand out there.
Right.
But what was it like owning Three Lions Gaming? I feel like I can catch the sense of pride that you had a little bit, because you mentioned Doug Gray owning it and being one of the OG players, our creators of the game and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I feel like you took that sense of pride and you tried to push it out in some of the stuff that you were doing with it.
Yeah.
But what was it like overall? Like, if you were to try to encapsulate your time owning Three Lions Gaming, how would you describe that?
It was really hard.
That's an honest and fair
It was
response.
really hard. And I don't mean that from a sense of like it wasn't doing well or I felt like I was drowning, anything like that in that way. It was hard because part of me, so I'm the guy that like when we're at a tournament and there's a kid that's like, I need this card for my deck, and I'm like, here, you can just have it. Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, it's a piece of cardboard. It's not going to hurt me one way or the other. You can have it. To go from that to go, okay, if somebody wants it now, I have to understand that I own a business first, which is really difficult. It's really difficult to get yourself to shift mindset and go, okay, this is a business. It needs to be profitable. Otherwise, it doesn't get to be a business anymore. It can't be just about a group of friends. And especially in the redemption community, it's hard to balance that. Like you want to be a friend with everybody, and but you also have to be able to understand that you're selling a product. And so what I tried to do is I tried to build into what we did value. So it wouldn't be just like the run of the mill, like you come and you get a couple cards you need for your deck. I tried to be something that people could, if you're a brand new player, and that's why we did like the deck builders. You know, if you're a brand new player and you have no idea what you're doing, and thank goodness my record, my like win-loss record wasn't posted anywhere really visible, so people wouldn't go, okay, I don't know if I want to buy decks from a guy who wins that little, but it was just trying to find innovative ways to make the game more accessible to a newer player, make it more attractive to someone that's from the outside looking in, trying to put Redemption into a position that it could do what it was intended to do, which was to draw people to Christ. To be fun, to be impactful, but ultimately the whole point is to draw people to Christ. And so making it accessible to new people, putting out things that somebody would walk by and go, oh, that's really a cool playmat. And then kind of look at it and go, oh, wait, is that Jesus? Wait, am I underwater looking? Like, yeah, like that playmat is intended to be, you're supposed to, you're like Peter. You've fallen under the water and Jesus is reaching down to pull you back up out of the water because your faith has failed. So just doing things like that. There is a sense with Redemption, especially then prior to your turn games and that kind of stuff. There was a sense that you were kind of a gatekeeper for the game in a way. When someone wanted to know what the price of a card was TLG selling it for? And so that was kind of the other side. That's why I kind of focused a lot on the pricing too, because I wanted it to be accurate. That if you're going to play something that's being played by a ton of folks, it needs to be either accessible because it's really easy to get, or the price needs to be determined by the demand. So I don't feel like I think there were some folks that were like, you're trying to do things like these other games. And I thought, I'm really not. What I am is I'm kind of a serial gamer, right? Like I like to look at what other games do and like what makes them good, what makes them bad. What are some things that some principles you can take from those and apply them to Redemption to make that gaming experience more rich.
I guess a similar, like if you try to draw a comparison, like you mentioned that some people might have thought you were just trying to copy other card games.
Right.
Well, you're in the gaming community. It's like being a Christian musician. You can't just forego and be like, okay, I'm not about the music industry. I'm not
Right.
like you have to dip your toe in that, and you have to do that side of it as well. Well,
Right.
I guess from the accounts that I was able to uncover about the way that you ran Three Lions Gaming from the time you took over, was it seemed like you were trying to bring it more in line with what other games were doing and getting out of their retailers or whatnot, to where there was a site where you could go and buy a t-shirt. And it seems like before that, maybe there weren't anywhere that you could get a Redemption t-shirt without making it yourself. Play mats weren't as accessible, and now that's obviously evolved and whatever, grown from that. But it seems like you were kind of on the forefront of trying to push that direction.
Well, there have always been people who have a passion for the game and who want to bring whatever gifts and talents they have to bear on the game. And I just had an opportunity in Three Lions Gaming to do that. I had been prepared really for that by owning the brick and mortar. And actually, like, I don't know how many brick and mortars there are that actually had a case of redemption cards, but we actually had a case that was just featured redemption cards in the brick and mortar. But I think that kind of prepared me for that. And so, like, for you, for instance, John, you have a passion, and you have brought that passion to bear on the redemption community through this. And I think what you're doing is just as impactful, if not more, than what I did, because you're continuing to bring to bear on the community the gifts that you have. And there's a lot of people that do that. Like, have you seen I may have heard about it because I was listening to one of your podcasts, the new Redemption Reimagined that.
Oh, Daniel the Creator.
Dude. Like, really? I'm just kind of blown away by that. Like, but that's just another example of someone who has, taken their passion and used it for the game.
Yeah, and those things look amazing.
It's crazy. Like, So that kind of stuff is, again, you go, well, it feels like he's trying to make it look like other games. Yeah, kind of. But one of the things that has always been attractive about the game Redemption is the incredible artwork. And the fact that most of the artwork is public domain, so there's not a lot of money spent on the artwork, but it's among probably the best artwork in any collectible card game I've ever seen.
Yeah, I would say that it's definitely, it's got that unique ability, because you can notice a piece of art on a card and then go into a random store and they've got that piece of artwork hanging up because it is public domain, like you mentioned. And I don't think you're going to walk around and see, like, Mark Poole hanging on the wall of a restaurant.
No.
So I definitely get what you're saying on that one. And it does look really incredible. And it's really cool how, even with the limitations of having to use public domain, Gabe and the guys that are designing the cards have done just a tremendous job from the time that the new card face was developed. And you can see the progression even just in that time period. Yeah. And that was around, 2011? So a little over a decade now, like 12, 13 years, you've got just so much that the game has improved on, to where if you were to open up packs of and this is one thing that I've wanted to do like a video on, is get like Magic the Gathering, their latest set, the latest, couple of different cards, and pop them open out of the packs. And Redemption is in line with those things now. Yeah. But I mean, like, it's incredible, but you also walk in that line of not trying to be like other card games, but still using elements. Right. That's who you're competing with. If you're talking about you want to use it as a potential ministry tool, who are you targeting? People that play card games, they're playing other card games, so you have to do things in line a little bit to where it doesn't feel like a knockoff when you come to this game. So that's where I feel like the motivation probably was, from the outside looking at, your time with Three Lions Gaming, trying to get it in line with that, so that someone doesn't come in and they're like, where can I buy cards? You can go to Cactus, or you can go to Three Lions Gaming to buy singles, and then that site be less robust when you compare it to other card games. You wanted to make it in line with that, is kind of the way that I saw that, or assumed that was the way that it was intended.
Yeah, I think that's probably very accurate.
So we've talked a little bit about or touched on pricing model, but what all went into that? Because from what other people have said, and the account, and Chris Fashman is one of the guys that I go up to his tournaments throughout the year, like his state and regional tournaments. I love that guy. But
Crash Fash.
Yeah, he talks about, dude, when you had Three Lions Gaming, he's like, always adjust the price on something, and it would make sense for the community. So like if a card was not being sold, but there was some demand for it, nobody should be paying $80+ for a Babel.
No.
And that's just an example of a card that at one point was like way higher than probably it should have been or something. And then it stopped selling, and then people were just buying packs to try to get it instead of, buying it at that price or trading for it within the community. But even on a smaller scale, a rare card that wasn't really played, maybe it was a rare in the set by name, but wasn't played that much, didn't necessarily carry the same value as a rare that was played a lot.
Yeah.
And you started like opening Pandora's box of how you can price that, engage that with the demand of the community. And Chris has talked to me a lot about just kind of the way that you did that in your time. But what all went into trying to do that? You mentioned that it was a lot of work owning Three Lions Gaming. I assume pricing was kind of one of those things, at least until you got kind of a flow of it.
Yeah, well, it's a matter of kind of establishing a plan and just letting it go, letting it work. So, for instance, I would, I established base prices for the rarities, and then I would establish basically based on what it was selling for originally, and then every month you would go, okay, so if it sold X amount of times, then it would go up X percent. If it didn't sell the whole month, then it would go down X percent. And so it was just a matter of paying attention each month to the sales. It was the most work, and this is going to, it's funny, like the most work really was just filling orders, because we were selling quite a bit, but it doesn't take a lot to get you busy when you've got a room that has, 500,000 cards in it. And then you have an order, and you've got to go and you've got to pull all of that order individually. Eventually, I got to a point where I was smart and used binders that held like 6 or less, depending on how many sold, of each card. So I just pulled out of binders instead of out of boxes, finally. But just, it was that more than anything. It was the logistics side of it, because the pricing, once you establish the benchmark, it's just a matter of paying attention to it, and then adjusting it, and then you adjust your Excel spreadsheet, and then once you export it into a PDF and reformat it, make sure it looks good and distribute it. I noticed that TLG is just doing the Excel spreadsheet now, which is probably smart. I probably should have done that back then, but I wanted to have something that was slick that someone could print off and be able to walk around. And for 2 reasons. Number one, I wanted people to be able to have a price list that they knew when it was updated. So they knew if they were looking at an old one or a new one. And it had Three Lions Gaming on it. So people were walking around with paper with Three Lions Gaming on it at redemption tournaments, at their church when they're hanging out with their youth group.
You wanted them to print the plug.
Yeah. Yeah, it was free advertising, really. So making it printer friendly just seemed to make sense.
How much or how long did it take to get that in place to where it was kind of running like a smooth system? You would just keep updating it based on sales. Did it take a little while for it to gain traction, or was it kind of a quick moving thing?
No, I mean, I don't know how noticeable it was from the community side of it. The most difficult part was getting the website up and running. And then it was always very, there was so much stuff. And I think I tried to do the resolution of the images way too big. And so it was laggy. I had to kind of figure some of that stuff out. Not lacky. But laggy.
That's another one of those redemption things you mentioned.
Yeah. But, so that side of it was the most difficult, was just kind of getting that website up and running, which I feel like is part of the value that I brought too, was that you could actually go and look up every single card, and we had everything. Like, I don't think there were cards that we didn't have available. Like, you could literally purchase any card from Three Lions at the time, or at least there for a while. I think there may have been times when we ran out of cards here and there, but that's when you knew the value needed to go up. The price needed to go up.
I guess moving into that, after you came in, you got the pricing model in line with what you had or what you wanted to do, and then you had the pricing guide for the community. The next thing you wanted to bring to the community was that swag we mentioned earlier, having that custom play mat at nationals, having shirts and other things, and however deep that you planned to get that, but you were just trying to bring those cool items to the community. what was your motivation for that? Like, what did you think overall? Like, we talked about bringing it in line kind of with other card games,
Yeah.
but I feel like it's almost one of those things to where, like, we're nerds. We play a nerd game. Like, let's take that and understand that we're coming from a certain jumping point already.
Yes.
But then I feel like it's like getting deeper into that nerd thing to where, like, you feel like this sense of, like, coolness because you're wearing a shirt that brands the game that you enjoy playing, your hobby. You've got the Three Lions Gaming shirt on. Yeah. Stuff like that. What was the driving, like, what did you hope that stuff would do for the community?
I think it's kind of like the price list. It was something that a player would be at a local game store, and let's say they're not playing Redemption at the moment. They're playing another game. They have their playmat out, and it says Redemption Champion. People are like, what is that? It's just another open door. It's another opportunity to talk about the game, which may lead to an open door to talking about faith, may lead to an open door to someone asking about the hope that we have. And we're always, we're told to always be ready to give a reason for the hope, right?
Absolutely.
And so it was just, I wanted to create some more open doors. And quite honestly, like some of the playmats and stuff that were out, I'm just like, there were people bringing playmats into my store that I owned. And some of the stuff I was just like, I don't know if I would even want to be seen with that sitting in front of me. And so, like, what are some things that we can put out that someone who plays Redemption would be proud to have? And so we did the Jesus playmat for that first national tournament that I hosted in Middletown, and then just to keep it consistent, we did the same thing at the one we hosted in Houston, and I'm proud of both of them. I still, when I'm up at Comics Cafe playing Magic Commander on a Friday night with a group of people, I'm laying out my national champion Redemption national tournament playmat, and people comment, "Man, that's really cool. Oh yeah, well this is a tournament we hosted. Oh yeah, really? Tell me about that. What's the game?" And so it opens doors, and that's really the entire motivation behind it. Yeah, it is cool to have swag. I love having stuff like that, and there was a little bit of like, other games have it. Why wouldn't we have that? Why wouldn't we have? Because people are all constantly, concerned about their cards, making sure their cards are nice, and people were bringing other playmats to tournaments for Redemption, and it's like, it'd be neat if we had something that was for us as a community.
Yeah.
And so did that, and I know that YTG has done some stuff that is really cool looking as well. Again, kudos to Derek for doing that. It's not cheap. I mean, it's an investment to do that, but man, is it worth it?
So two things. First of all, just so that we're transparent with this, you've mentioned Derek with Your Turn Games. He actually last year sold Your Turn Games.
Oh, did he?
Yes, he was already involved in the community, but his name's Andy Fish from Indiana, and he's taken that and kept it going. But so that business has changed hands, and there hasn't been really a drop off with that. But just so that you're aware, I
did not know that
for any context that might come up. But yeah,
so it's running out of Indiana now.
It is
cool,
and the guy that owns it, super awesome guy. Him and Derek still have kind of a solid relationship to where the contender decks that they do, which is kind of like their introductory. They have challenger, and then contender decks is like a step up for play. Derek still helps make some of those, so it's not like he sold it and he's hands off now. But Andy is
good for him. It's awesome.
It seems like and this kind of goes back to the top in all of your contributions to the game. It seems like that are outside of like maybe card design, and we can talk about that in a little bit, but it seems like everything is done with an outreach mentality. We started off the top of the conversation talking about using the game as a ministry tool, and it seems like it's a t-shirt, it's a play mat that brands the game, lets you, generate business for your brand, Three Lions Gaming at the time. But it seems like really when you talk about creating those open doors and those opportunities to then speak and have a conversation with someone based off of those things, it seems like that's kind of a common thread for all the things that you were doing. And then I guess another layer of that was, and this is kind of one of those things to where I guess you took a chance here and probably didn't feel like that big of a chance. You were just trying to help out, but you ended up making the decision to help sponsor a fan site for the game, which was, a project that Gabe brought, and that was Land of Redemption. And Land of Redemption is still an active hub and landing spot for different content for the game. And, it has the reg, all the links that you would need to as an advanced player or someone that's trying to research the game. And that's still going. But what was it like making that decision and getting the chance as Three Lions Gaming, as like a stalwart in the Redemption community, as you mentioned, being founded by Doug Gray originally. Now you have that, and you get to keep not just holding that torch, but like building the flame up a little bit by sharing and having the opportunity to help Gabe get that going and sponsoring it for several years after that, I would assume, because they still have an active sponsorship with Ken now.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that was an absolute no-brainer. Like, we're going to put some content up that's going to be specific to Redemption. It's going to be, multifaceted. It's going to be updated on a regular basis. I'll be happy to pay to be a part of that. I'll be happy to help with your fees that you're having to incur. I mean, it's not a multi-million-dollar endorsement, but it's an endorsement of, it's a solidifying of a relationship that was already there. Between that group of guys and between TLG and I know YTG is also listed on their website as a sponsor. It just makes sense for those that have a vested interest, to group together and work together. Again, common interest. We're trying to get the word out. And man, I love what those guys do there. The unsung hero in all of this, I think, is Gabe and that leadership team. As much as I butt heads, like, I don't even know if they think of it that way, but every time I would, here's an idea, vomit an idea out, they would go, no, thanks. as much as I, at the moment, felt like, why aren't they listening? I wish they would just listen. Looking back, I go, they were so smart not to listen. and to continue to do what they're doing is just, it's cool. I mean, it's amazing. And I know it's tiresome. I know it's difficult. I know it's hard. I know they do other things for a living. And to invest and to pour into it, it was an absolute no-brainer to be a part of that, to invest in it. So
I guess kind of following that, a lot of the things that you did, you were just the first to do, and they've kind of grown since then. So that's kind of where a lot of the impact comes in. But you sponsored them, and now Your Turn Games, I know, at least sponsors 2 YouTube channels, Redemption with Jaden, and then Rob M Studios from
Rob M Studios. Yep.
They sponsor them to help continue to generate content for the game. The podcast is actually sponsored by John Early, who now owns Covenant Games. Which,
I was wondering if and when that was ever going to happen. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you talking about just people with, like-minded goals and, trying to grow the game and working together. There's so much content for the game now that is sponsored, and I think a lot of that comes from, even if the decision was a no-brainer, you still made the decision and made the, the choice to do that, to show that you can, work together. And it's not like every adventure or every venture that someone takes on for growing the game isn't a solo adventure. It can be a partnership, even if Your Turn Games and Three Lion Game, they have a lot of the same customers, and they're trying to compete for business. That's the way business works. But they can still come together and say, hey, we're going to sponsor Land of Redemption, and, come together and partner with that. And it's really cool to see. And then just how that, willingness to help kind of has grown. Because I can tell you on the podcast side, I mean, if we're talking about monthly fees, you wouldn't expect that it would be as much as it is in order to get a podcast on like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of those different directories. The cost to do that is significant when you talk about the fact that I tell my wife, hey, I'm spending money on cards. I'm spending money on all of the sound equipment already. Oh, by the way, now I need, $40+ of monthly fees to host a podcast. Yeah. And to have someone willing to step in and say, hey, I'll help you with that. That's really cool to see. And I think it grows from kind of that attitude that you had of, being willing to, be the backing support of something that someone's trying to do that's new and, put themselves out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you alluded to the real unsung heroes, and that is our wives who put up with a hobby that consumes so much of our time
Oh, absolutely.
and resources, because I don't know. I don't know if it's an understanding that it's either this or golf. And this is better because, at least it's Jesus. But it's one of those things where I know we've had those kind of discussions too, my wife and I, about, well, here we are, and here's an investment that I have an opportunity to make. Is this something we want to do? And, there's a sense in which she understands kind of the goal. She understands where it's all headed to and gets behind it. So, and I think that's a similar picture of, supporting one another in the community, the way that you have described it. So, and congrats to John Early for owning Covenant. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I guess that happened a year ago because we just came up on the first full year completing of him sponsoring the podcast.
So did they just put Banny up in storage, or what happened to him?
I think there's a partnership.
Good for them.
I don't know how it works. That's the side I don't get into, but I think
you don't get into that, but that's cool. No, that's great.
Yeah, I think long term it's going to be John moving forward, and Chris Baney is kind of stepping away as time progresses in their arrangement. But it's nice to see, that's another business that's been around for a while, changing hands to someone else younger that kind of came up with the game, and then hopefully furthering that impact for a long time to come.
Very cool. As long as Chris still comes to nationals and yells at people to get into the room when it's time to start playing.
Those are classic things you can't get away from. So
love that guy.
I guess you alluded to being the first nationals host that had some kind of live stream set up, and then I know that I saw, and I couldn't go back and find these. I don't know if they're no longer on YouTube or whatever, but I remember seeing at one point you had John Early's 2018 Nationals winning deck, and you were doing a deck profile, and that's one of the first videos that I found because I was like, okay, well, what are the top decks when I came in as a player, and I found that, and so it was really cool that even a snapshot of at the time that I came in, this is like 3 years ago. For the 2016 tournament, and then 2018 was, a couple of years before that, or I guess the year before that was 2019. But it seemed like you put a lot of importance, and this is again goes back to the outreach of, wanting to put the game out there to open those doors and whatnot. But you put a real strong focus on having content for the game, and you've been around other card games where fan created content is. It's immeasurable for like Magic the Gathering. You can go on YouTube, type that up, and you're not going to struggle to find videos. If you go and type Redemption, you're going to come up with a couple of, content sources from recent memory, like Jaden and Rob doing their thing on YouTube, but there's not a lot of that. And there was even less, I guess, in 2016 when you decided to do that. So how much of an impact were you hoping that had, and how important did you find it for the game to have some type of, so a new player can go and find gameplay of the biggest thing within the game is the community, and the community, their biggest thing is getting together at nationals, that once a year thing to where you get to hang out with people, and you get to put that out there on a platform to where people might just, pass by and see it, so to speak.
Well, and I know you're not gonna necessarily convey the sense of community through a video like that. Although, there was a sense that, if there are people that aren't able to be there, and I've been there before, where you want to go but you can't, and so how cool would it be if people that wanted to be there and wanted to experience a piece of it could jump online and watch a game or two and just kind of at least have a sense of, being a part of it in a small way. The other side of that, though, and it's something that kind of a criticism I have for the Redemption community a little bit, is that we're very, very close to the vest when it comes to our deck lists, which I think is weird, mainly because pretty much every other game, you can go and you can find top 10, top 20 deck lists at major tournaments where there's lots of money on the line. You can get everything. You know exactly what they're playing. You know exactly what's included. And I don't know. I've always felt that it was weird that we don't do that. I think we're almost trying to kind of keep it to ourselves trying to have a surprise. And I know you're always going to have surprises. There's always going to be people that are up at 3 a.m. the night before Type 1 at Nationals building a deck. And it's not going to be put out there because they didn't even know they were going to play it until that, like 5 hours before the tournament starts. I get that. But the stuff where you get to a national tournament and there have been regionals and states and yet no clue. There's inklings. If you know who to listen to on the message boards, you can kind of get kind of an idea that there's something out there that's being played, but you don't really know. And so for, to get John Early, for instance, to allow us to do a profile of his deck was a really cool thing for me, because if I'm a new player, I want to play like John Early plays. And the first step to doing that is to know what he's playing. Now, here's the thing. Maybe a lot of us don't realize this, but because I had all the cards in the game. At one point, I think I had 6 of every single card. Every alternate, like, in Apostles, where some of them got printed with the fish facing one way and the fish facing the other way. I had all the variations. Every single card. All the error cards. The ones that don't even have, like, in the women's set that didn't have, like, the numbers. Like, I had 6 of all of those. I had every card in the game, and I couldn't make a deck to win. It didn't matter what the cards were. I could have built any deck, but I wasn't winning. It's not about the person it's not about the deck, it's about the person.
Yeah.
It's about them figuring out how to play, and if it works with their play style, and if they're good at playing that particular, and if they have good intuition when they're playing, if they can read their opponent. There's so much more that goes into it. And so, for me, it was good to have content. But I wanted the content to be stuff that would kind of open up some of the stuff that seemed to have been veiled. Yeah. To use a somewhat spiritual
You wanted
analogy.
to tear the veil.
Yeah. Rip the veil top to bottom.
Let me tell you that, and this might be another thing to where, like, we can keep talking about the impact that you had based on you starting something and it moving forward. Mm-hmm. I would say that since I came in, I remember in 2019, it being exactly how you described, like, nobody really knew what other people were playing. Like, even when I went to a local tournament or a district tournament at Jay and Jeremy's, and, like, these are my boys in state that, like, we talk to back and forth, and they show up, and you don't know what they're going to play, and then you don't want to tell them what you're going to play, because then they're going to use that to know what to put in their deck to counteract you. And that's just a microcosm of, like, it on a bigger scale would be even more, I guess, shut off for new players coming in. But I can tell you that in the last 2 years, that has been flipped completely on its head to where there is even a Discord. So we have the main Discord for Redemption. There's another one called Zerubbabel's Temple, and it is literally just all kinds of deck lists. And there's ones from, like, last season where people are trying to identify the top archetypes and fully flesh out what the meta is based on knowing what people are playing. Last week, I got to share tournament results from some state tournaments that happened. And, well, actually, one of them was a regional, but state and regional tournaments that happened last week. And not only did I get to share the results on the podcast, but people mentioned what deck they were playing. And then some of those deck lists, have been shared in the past, and they've just been tweaked since. But there's an openness with deck building now, and all of that started with, I guess, last season before last, so 2021, there was a combo that came out to where they used an interaction with Pig's Lost Soul and a reprint of Love at First Sight that could not be negated by an evil card to where it shuffled your hand and then you drew 8 cards or whatever. Shuffle your hand, draw 8 cards. But Pig's Lost Soul is a neutral card, so it can't be negated. So you can negate the draw but force them to shuffle their hand. So it was basically a complete NPE, negative play experience, of you sit down.
Yeah, I know what NPE is. Yeah.
They get you to shuffle your hand, and you get the 3 cards on your turn to try to get back in the game, but you're not getting back in the game.
Right.
And that was shared and openly shared in enough time for people to try to deck build against it, to where that deck didn't even win nationals. As strong as it was, being able to do that turn 1, I'm talking about turn 1, 90% clip of being able to pull this combo off. And it didn't win. Josh Potratz built a counter deck to it, and was able to be effective against enough things that other people were playing. And that was
Yeah.
a smaller tournament because it was coming off of COVID still, and it was in
Right.
Texas. Not a lot of people traveled still with all of the travel restrictions and things, but it was a smaller tournament. But even though that
And
was
it's in Texas.
even though that was the best deck by far as what it was trying to accomplish and being able to set it up, it didn't
Right.
win because it was openly shared and people planned for it. And
Right.
that doesn't happen if you're still in the, the time period that you're mentioning, to where people are still holding that close to the vest. And
Right.
then another interaction with a new card kind of allowed someone to get a bunch of card value and basically draw through most of their deck early on in the game. And that was from last tournament season, and it was shared, and they ended up fixing it to limit it, but it was openly shared and tested to try to find what the solution would be. Community was involved with that. So I definitely see the validity of what you're saying about how people used to be close to the vest, because when I came in, it was like that. But I've gotten to see progressively over the time that now, if you want to know what someone's playing when they are winning tournaments, it's not hard to find out. There's so much like online gameplay now for like Jaden sharing what he's playing in tournaments. That's half his videos is, this is what I'm playing in a tournament. There's a Lackey Grand Prix now to where we're playing consistently online, so other players can jump in and you can play cards that maybe you don't even own yet in an unofficial tournament. And this is like where you play one matchup a week type of thing.
Yeah.
Then there's one that's done over Zoom and Discord, and it just lets everybody engage with that. And there's so much of that gameplay coming out that nobody's able to efficiently hide a deck without just not playing it.
Right.
So I think that there's been a lot of positive change in that regard. And maybe that started with, trying to get a John Early deck and open it up. And
well, I just think over time you kind of realize that it's a little ingrown at that point.
Yeah.
and something needs to change. And I don't think I was the first one or the only one to think about that. But I'm really encouraged by what you're talking about, because the online availability and just being able to have a community where you don't have to be face to face, so to speak. And I still love that element of it, but there's so much stuff there's so many possibilities. And again, it goes back to that whole thing about people allowing their talents to come to bear on the game, using their passion, people speaking up and, starting a Discord or starting a Lackey tournament and keeping all the online tabletop stuff up to date and bug free. And I know that's not easy either. So
definitely, I think overall it's a healthier thing for the game. So I can see where you're saying that it used to be and knowing where it is now. And I think it's come a long way. But I guess shifting gears to now your tournament hosting and the couple of nationals that you hosted, we'll start first with the 26 tournament, and that featured the release of Cloud of Witnesses. And I have been told that in the past, like long ago, that the Warrior set saved the game, because it was at a point to where it was not very engaging and people were stepping away. And then the Warrior set came out and created a lot of excitement, new things in the game.
Incredible.
And then I've also heard that Cloud of Witness is like the second, set that had the ability to quote unquote possibly have saved redemption, because there was new leadership taking over. There was a lot of that overturn with elders, and it was a set that needed to do well coming off of early church and persecuted church. They needed a lot of like a jolt of excitement for the community. And Cloud of Witnesses was that. It had alternate borders release at nationals, just a lot of fun things around that tournament. So what do you remember about the 2016 national tournament? And then like, how important do you think that having that Cloud of Witness set and just that experience reignite the fan base was to the game?
The set, you bringing back memories with that Warriors comment.
Well, that's what I'm here for.
yeah. That was the set that was the most recent set that was out when I started, was Warriors. And so I remember the kind of the resurgence that I heard about, because I guess I was part of the resurgence. Like I started getting interested in the game because of it, but I wasn't around to see kind of the downturn. But certainly, after early church, persecuted church, it was like they were trying to do new things. Like he introduced a was it 2 brand new brigades? Is that right?
Yeah,
Maybe.
there was
Anyway,
Clay, I know for sure.
Clay, and then Teal had recently been put in. So anyway, there was excitement around that, but it was almost like not enough. And so when Cloud of Witnesses came out, and I remember just hearing all the cool stuff we were going to get to kind of see for the first time at Nationals, and going, dude, I'm hosting Nationals where this stuff is going to happen. This is going to be so awesome.
Yeah.
I was such a fanboy. As just being able to be a part of that, and bringing it back to Ohio was fun. Like I said, we had hosted in Columbus. Gosh, I'm trying to remember how long ago that was, but that was at least maybe 4 years prior to that, maybe even earlier. But being able to bring it to Ohio, pretty much, I mean, it's kind of like Knoxville in a sense, like it's central-ish to the player base. It's a little north for the southern guys, but it's a much welcomed kind of closeness to those guys that are up in the north. And so it was a good spot location-wise. And had we stayed in Ohio, I think we may have kind of created some kind of arrangement in a similar way that Fashman has, where it's going back there every few years, just because it's so centrally located and Chris knows what he's doing. So I think had we stayed there, we may have been. Anyway, it's not about what could have been. It's about what is.
And what is
so
to
hosting
come.
it was, yeah, hosting it was something that I don't know that I really appreciated what it meant to the community until after the fact. I just know for me, it was a ton of fun to have my Redemption family in town. like I didn't have to go to them. They came to me this time, which was really cool, especially considering a Nationals or 2 before that, we had taken a van to Minnesota and we were about an hour and a half out and our van broke down. And so we had to get people to come from Nationals to come get us and drive us there. So it was really nice for people to come to us and we didn't have to worry about van troubles. But again, it's the community aspect. It's some of the things that we were doing with the streaming. It was the commentary. It was just trying to have as much fun as we could in the midst of having the event. I know that the Ark Encounter was opening right about that same time, and so I thought it'd be cool. Some of the offsite things that we had offered or told people about, where you can go down to the Ark Encounter and check that out as a family, or go down as part of a vacation. I think there were some people that did that, but tying that national promo to that idea, and then getting Doug Gray to do the art. So we're not only bringing the tournament to Ohio, where Doug Gray is, but also getting him to do the art for the card was just extra special. And then he came and hung out with us for a while, and people got to meet Doug, and it was just, it was a really, really special thing. It's an appreciation for the kind of the history of the game. And I really feel like during the tournament, I was just kind of a fan of the game more than a tournament host. I was making sure everything was working, but at the same time, I was just being a fan of the game and being a part of the community, and just, I don't know, I just loved every minute of it. It was so much fun.
Yeah. Doug's one of those that I've got on the short list of people that I would love to bring onto the podcast at some point.
Yeah, he would be cool.
Yeah, just knowing, and that goes back to, I talked before about how it seems like you take pride in the fact that, being involved in the game, especially with the title of, Three Lions Gaming attached to it at the time and whatever. But what was the timing for you owning Three Lions Gaming? Did you own that? How soon before 2016? Because that's one of the things that never really gets told is, when you take over, when you took over Three Lions Gaming from Ken the first time. How soon after did you host the Nationals and get to be involved here?
So I bought, okay, I have to go through the timing in my head here. So I bought Gem City Games in 2011. I owned it for 3 years. So 11 to 12, 12 to 13, 13 to 14. So I sold it in 14. and either bought TLG late in 14 or in 15. So it wasn't that far removed. But yeah, so I'm going to say it was 15. So it was probably a year prior. It was the year prior. So in 2015, myself and two of my buddies got in a truck, drove to Phoenix, Arizona, picked up all of the redemption product from Ken, dropped off a check, and drove back in a span of 48 hours.
That was probably a fun road trip in essence, but that was probably a lot of work moving all those cards that you mentioned he had.
That was hard work. No, but the really funny part was though, like, and this is not to minimize at all, but Ken's inventory, like when I brought it to the house, I was like, okay, like I already had more stuff, like more cards, than he had in his inventory. Like I already had that. It was the sealed stuff that I didn't have. So, but it was a pickup truck that we went to pick up stuff in. So it wasn't a ton of stuff, but it was the coolest part was there were these custom drawer units that I think his dad, or his father-in-law made for him for that company. And it was stored in these two, like, I don't know, 5 foot tall drawer units that had about 5 or 6 drawers per unit. So it wasn't a ton of stuff as far as singles goes. But yeah, I mean, it was a harrowing journey. It was like we rented a hotel room in La Quinta, and slept for like 4 hours before we had to get up and go over to the house when we said we were going to meet him and pick up the stuff, and then immediately hit the road. So if you don't have friends like that, get you some. Yeah. That'll do that.
And those friends that you mentioned, were they ones that you met through the game?
No. No, these are two buddies. These are two buddies from the church, who think I'm a nerd and are like, "You're weird. Why do you play this game?" But they're also like, "Road trip, definitely."
Well, see, those friends though, the ones that'll call you weird for playing a card game, everybody's got those friends.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So you ended up buying this, and a year later you hosted nationals, and then you were able to bring that original artwork for Noah's Ark, and that is the pride and joy of Mr. J Chambers, having that whole deck strategy that revolves around that card.
Yeah.
With the Flood Survivors. He loves that thing. And that's actually one of the decks that's doing really well this tournament season, that's featuring Flood Survivors, and they've done like Sadducees and a couple of other thematic defenses that do soul hiding. So like they let you underdeck souls, and he's paired that up, and he's rolling with it. So that card's actually getting some burn right now.
That's cool.
It is really cool. And I know that John Early has I think you had the artwork printed and had people sign to when they got to nationals, and he's gotten that from you, and he's got that. I know that he's talked about that. Yeah,
but he owns the original artwork, the painting, like it's actual painting. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like you being the driving force for getting artwork into the game is something that I've been told a lot about. You know, like obviously we've got this cool artwork already, but then being able to bring in a couple of different original pieces to the game. So how much did you focus on that and want to do that stuff? And how cool was it just being able to be involved with bringing that to the game?
I thought that getting Doug involved would make a ton of sense. It was an anniversary tournament, if I remember that correctly. Was it 20th? I forget what we're at now. I think I saw, trust me, I've been on the message boards. People are seeing my name pop up on the message boards. They're like, wait, what? But I forget what we're at now as far as number of nationals, but it was one of those, kind of important numbers of nationals. And I really wanted to get him to create something for the game. And he was very, very easy to work with, was more than willing to be a part of that. And, the artwork side, getting that just made sense. It made sense for the community. Again, just an acknowledgement of the past and an appreciation for the future, and kind of creating something for the now. But the other one that we got, that I didn't commission, I just bought the rights to was the one from Majestic Heavens. And we actually used that as the artwork for the Nationals. That was the national promo in Houston, and it was also we did the playmat using that artwork. And that was just something that I got from I got on DeviantArt and found a guy that was doing art that I really liked, and just shot him a message. Said, "Look, here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'd love to do with this particular piece of artwork that you have. Are you willing to let us do that?" And we, just set up an arrangement, send him payment, and we're good to go. So, for me, it was just, I was trying to make Nationals something special. Like, it's cool that we have national promos that are like a reprint of a Son of God, or, it's just, but it's like, that's okay, but let's do something cool. Let's do something different with the promo. Let's see if we can't make it something. And maybe I'm misremembering. Now that I think about Majestic Heavens, I can't remember if that was a national promo or if we used it for a different level promo.
I think it was a seasonal promo in the end.
Seasonal was what it was, yeah. The one we did was Everlasting Ground.
Yeah, Whirlwind, Everlasting Ground.
Whirlwind, Everlasting Ground, yeah. Which was a callback to the previous year's hurricane in Houston. So
the more you know.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So really it's just a desire to do something special for the Nationals. Try to make the national promo not just a reprint, but do something cool with it. And I think, and maybe this is inaccurate, but I think that they try to do that with the hosts, especially those that have I don't think they have hosts for a national tournament that don't have a vested interest in the game. And I think there is at least some discussion of what would you like the promo to be? How would you like for it to look? And maybe it was just me. Maybe I was just pushy and like they didn't want to deal with me, so they're like just gave in. But yeah, it was not really about the art as much as it was trying to make the experience of Nationals something that was memorable. Because honestly, the hosts that I have gone to the tournaments of, I'm thinking of John Michalician with the create your own promo card. That was so cool. Now, is it realistic? Is it a good idea going forward? I don't know, maybe not, but it was so much fun. The national tournament hosts tend to always put some of themselves in the event so that you walk away not only having had a great time playing the game, but like you get to feel like you know the person a little bit more.
Yeah, that's understandable. I haven't gotten to see a ton because I've only been to 2 nationals, but I definitely get the differences with those. Being one was hosted by Roy, who is you said he's a force, and then Gabe as well. But yeah, something funny enough about your Majestic Heavens is that I have, and unless someone else has printed them on their own, I have 2 foil versions of the tokens, that one's for Old Testament, one's for New Testament. What? And I have that because Gabe was testing foil promos for the national promos for last year's nationals. And in the build up to that was one of the things he had tested. And so he gave them to me. So I have actually that artwork in foil, which is really cool.
That is awesome.
Because even though those foil cards are not official,
right,
I can technically play mine in an official deck because they're just tokens, and tokens can be represented from anything.
Exactly.
So technically mine's legal, which is really cool.
Yeah. That's awesome.
They look really good too. Great artwork for being foil.
Well, I can imagine. Oh yeah.
2016 also was the year that for the first time, not only did you have the promo for participating in nationals, but you had the winter promos, the full art. And so right now, I don't know how much you've kept up with it or knew about it as being the top card in the game, but 2016 Son of God is like it's like the creme de la creme. It is.
Is that the foil?
It's not foil, but it's the full art of that Gustave Doré art.
Okay.
That has Jesus reaching down. But that one, it's like one of those that it was done so early on in these promos being made available that it's, it's the priciest card that's in the game. And I was able to last year get a copy of that. I bought John Early's copy, and it's one of my most prized possessions now. But those, the whole chase that I had of getting to build out an entire collection coming in 2019, and I was able to go back and try to chase all of those cards and put together a winter promo set. And I've done it. I've got all of those cards, and it's really cool.
Wow.
But all of that started here also at 2016, to where you're talking about creating that just experience that once you're a part of it, it's like a memory that you're always going to have, and you can always look back on. It's in your file cabinet, so to speak. So what was it like having those cards for the first time there? Being the host on it, you getting to hand people those cards for the first time. And then what did you think about those cards for the game and, their long-term value that they bring to the game?
Well, it's one of those things where you're like, finally, okay, this is so cool. like, why not? What's the harm in creating? It's not that they're special in the sense that it's a card that no one else can get their hands on, and so you're the only one that's able to play this card. No, it's another treatment of a card that everyone's got.
Yeah.
And so it adds just that another level of excitement. And the reality is it also helps those guys who invest a lot of themselves into playing. Some of those guys end up being able to recoup some of their costs because some people want those cards and they sell them so that they can recoup some of their travel costs or, so even though that, maybe this has changed too, but historically there have not been like financial gain, any kind of prizes that you get. You just get cards and packs and a pat on the back and a picture with Rob, and a trophy if you're really good and you get R&RS points. But it's something where those guys can actually, if they do well, they can sell spent stuff and recoup some of their costs. But for everybody else, when you're doing the participant promo, I thought it was so weird when I first started going. My first nationals was in Kansas City, and we drove from Ohio to Kansas City overnight, got there super early. And when we went inside and registered that next morning, they handed you a stack of promos. I'm like, why am I getting these? I didn't do anything. Like,
it's your participation trophy.
you get all the, you get all the promos. What do you mean all the promos? Well, all the national promos up to this point. And to me, I was like, okay, that's weird. Because I've looked online. I know how much these cards are. Or maybe I already bought one of these cards and now I'm kind of annoyed that I just got handed a free copy. But it's another one of those things where the generosity of Rob, and I still remember turning in empty packs to get free packs from Rob. This may be something you're not familiar with. But back in the day, you could take foil packs and cut the UPCs off and send them in. And if for every 10, you got a free pack, he would send you a free pack.
Yeah, that's not something I was aware of.
What other card game did that? But it was just a picture of the generosity of Rob and his desire to bless the community. And I really feel like that's what those kind of cards were. They were to the community that had asked for them. Because a lot of folks were like, why can't we have full art cards? That'd be really cool. Why can't we do full art promos? That'd be really cool. And I think Rob and the leadership team do a really good job of listening to that and gauging, okay, what can we do? What part of this can we do and not do more damage than good? And then they do as much as they possibly can. Which, and like you said, I got to be a part of that in 2016. Got to be a part of people having these promos and going, wow, this is so cool. And being able to have, when you host, you get some extra incentives. Like you get a set of the promos that you get to have. And it's like, oh, this is really cool. Because you don't really get to play. Like you're not playing. You could, but you're not really playing. And so you get to be a part of that just as much as anybody else does. But again, I feel like I'm kind of a broken record here where I keep saying, it's just a picture of the generosity and the love for the community and, just listening and doing what they can to bless the community.
Yeah.
And then, you're looking at the roots page there and the community blesses them right back.
Absolutely. Now, those promos have grown,
Hmm.
obviously, over the years. And one of the other requests was, I know TXP came in foils, and the community's
Hmm.
been like, hey, it'd be really cool to get foils. So last year, promos got the foil treatment. And then
Oh,
this
that's so
year,
cool.
they're working on doing that again. But if you'll
Oh,
check your messenger, I just sent you what the first place promo is going to be. It's going to be the first ever textless Son of God, because you know what the card does in the game. So now they
uh-huh.
can feature the artwork completely and not have the ability on it. And when you play it, you know what it does. And that's going to be in foil, and that is going to be the first place promo for this year. And that thing is
Dude,
awesome. And I know
dude.
it's the third time they've used that artwork, but it's still
Yeah, I love that
awesome
artwork.
because that's yeah, I've got card sleeves with that artwork. And
In foil, that's going to look sick.
yeah. So that is just kind of the progression that those cards have taken since 2016. That's where we're at now,
Wow.
and it's going to be fantastic. I'm really hoping that Jeremy Chambers can carry me to another winning team so that I can get one. That's what I'm hoping.
Uh-huh.
Because we won last year, and he won, and I was just there.
You just observed.
Yeah, I was a witness to it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. Congratulations, by the way.
Thanks. You obviously are a two-time national host, and this is something I found out very late. You know, I told you I had to retool the questions.
Hmm.
I did not
Yeah.
even know that you hosted 2018. Or I'm sorry, yeah, 2018. So 2016 I knew about, and 2018 is the one that they mentioned that you hosted as well, and I was like, I
Hmm.
didn't know that, but obviously digging further, that's when you moved to Texas and kind of
Yep.
got information on that. But how was that experience? Because that's one that I don't have as much knowledge of, because there's not, Jay Chambers telling me, dude, this was the greatest tournament of all time, and just talking your ear off about how, and Jay, he can talk your ear off.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but he talks so much about the 2016 tournament, and I've got all of those recollections from him and from
Yeah.
others about that one. But 2018 is one that I don't have much basis for. So, what was that
Yeah.
tournament like? And then in comparison to 2016?
I mean, it paled in comparison to 2016 just because there were not as many folks there, and it was like, yeah. So I mean, kind of, it sounds like maybe the last tournament in Texas is maybe similar in feel. It's just a long way out here. I mean, it's even like, even if you live on the border of Texas, it's still a long way.
Yeah,
Like, it's a long drive. And it's not that it's hard to fly in. I mean, we've got two airports, but three if you count Austin, which is, sometimes even a good option. But it was a good tournament. It was, in the sense that nothing was controversial, nothing was difficult. We didn't have any snafus. There wasn't really anything bad. But it was not 2016.
I guess that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, I mean, it just I don't know. It was the venue at Spring Creek is not nearly the size that the venue was in Ohio. In Ohio, we were in a giant, like a full size gym, and in Texas, where everything is not necessarily bigger in Texas. So we were in like a church fellowship hall. So it was not a huge space, but it was. I mean, it was still a good time. It was not 2016. 2016 was so unique in so many ways, and yeah, I don't know. To be real honest, 2018 is kind of a blur for me. Thinking back on it, just because so much has happened since then, with all the challenges we faced in 2020 and going forward, and just as a church trying to navigate that and figure out how we were going to continue to be the church in the midst of all the weirdness. And then also just school has kind of scrambled my brain a little bit as far as remembering that stuff. What I do remember is just the community. Roy, obviously, in town. I mean, he's in San Antonio, but he's close. the guys from Dallas being a big part of that. But yeah, there may be some folks who had. I know, for instance, like our whole play group, this was their first experience with the national tournament. Was the one that we hosted, and so I think there was a sense in which they didn't really appreciate what we had. Like they had never had the experience of driving to Knoxville, sleeping in a sketchy Red Roof Inn, and which I'm glad they have changed their suggested hotel. Good job, Chris.
Do not stay on Chapman Highway. Do not.
Yeah. It's a little sketchy. But I think there was a bit of kind of taking it for granted from our play group, especially. And I think when we were in Ohio, there wasn't a lot of that. Like our group had traveled a lot, and so they knew what they were getting. They knew the benefit that they were receiving from having it close.
Also, I guess, and maybe this doesn't play into it, but if you had just taken over Three Lions Gaming and, the next year, 2016, that was kind of like you were still in that early getting deep into your involvement with the game. And then 2018, you were probably already juggling so many roles with the game that it just, when you say it's a blur, you're probably just busy. And you weren't able to take it in the moment like you were 2016, if I had to guess, knowing how you get when, or how I get when I'm busy and trying to, juggle something where it might be an important thing, but it's kind of just a blur for me because I'm just trying to get through it like it's another thing on the calendar.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on to another role that you did was being involved with the Elder team.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I knew of other accounts of you helping with, play testing or coming up with some card design elements, but I didn't know that you actually were officially on the Elder team, if you will, in that official role. But that was something that I learned when, researching and trying to come up with, questions for the podcast here. And that's another thing that I don't think a lot of people that have come into the game since maybe know, but you were an Elder and you were involved with a lot of the set design. And at least, you might have told them 10 bad ideas for them to get one good idea, like we talked about, but you were one of the dudes.
Yeah.
So what was that experience like, being able to be part of that team?
I don't know. I feel like I was one of the elders that was constantly on probation.
Well, that might mean you're doing something right, pushing the envelope a little bit.
Well, and I don't even know. Like I don't know about you, but I struggle with imposter syndrome a lot. In pretty much every role that I fill or try to fill, I struggle to really believe that I kind of belong and should be there.
And you called that
feel like
imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome, where you feel like you're in disguise and you're sitting in the room and everyone doesn't really know you're
When I compare that, like my job, I went from being one of the guys to the guy in that top role, management for our site. And it's a warehousing business. We're a distributor. But the next person, like the person I answer to lives in Lincoln, Maine, and I'm in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And then the HR office and the headquarters is in Green Bay, Wisconsin. So I don't really have anyone that oversees me directly. Like I'm the dude. And
you're the guy.
And I feel like when I first took over, and I feel more comfortable with it now, but when I first took over, I was like, do these people know what they're doing? And it's worked out since. So I'm thankful for that. But that's, when you talk about imposter syndrome, maybe that's my experience of that.
Yeah. And being in the midst of those meetings, several hours at the time, it wasn't really Zoom. We weren't that fancy, but just online calls where you're working through spreadsheets and you're just talking shop, thinking about things that might work, that might not work. Everybody taking on different responsibility. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that I had very little appreciation for before I got into it. That it's like, wow, okay, there's actually a lot of work going into the cards, and then just trying to make sure that you're not creating a monster that you can't somehow control later, as far as power creep and mechanics, the thing, I'm really glad about rotation because it helps. It's going to help that group tremendously because they're going to be able to go, okay, we have a specific set of cards that we have had some kind of input on. So kind of if there's an error, if there's something messed up, it's ours. We own it. We got to do something about it. Whereas before it was like, well, but there's these other cards and we don't really know what that ability means anymore.
Yeah.
And so
sounds like booster draft.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Wait, what is this? What does that even mean? But I really, really enjoyed the time. I'm thankful again for the trust that I was given to run with some stuff and to try different things. I really loved the side where we go, okay, scripturally speaking, what does this mean? Or how can we make the gameplay reflect in a way what is being conveyed? Because really, it's almost like you're interpreting kind of in the same way that someone is creating like a translation. Like you're translating scripture into a game and you're trying to make it make sense somehow. Now, obviously, you have all kinds of anachronism when you're doing that because you're having Goliath fight the Apostle Paul.
Yeah.
It's like, it actually wouldn't ever happen in real life. Anyway, but the side of it where you go, okay, here's the scripture, or I think there was something you mentioned that they went ahead and adopted more fully now is this idea that something can be dual testament, which, I love that because that reflects the ways in which scripture references itself. The interconnectedness between the Old and New Testament, the way the New Testament writers constantly refer to the Old, and the way that the Old foreshadows what would be coming in the New, and to be able to reflect that in a card is just such a cool thing. Be able to go, okay, here's an idea. It's in both. Check it out.
Yeah, and that was your original idea, our suggestion at the time, right?
It was something that I was pushing heavily for. I don't know if I was the one that first came up with it, but I definitely was pushing heavily for it, thinking this is a really good idea. Let's do this.
And I think that's one of the things that, whether it was your original thing or you just pushing for it, but that's one of the things that has really helped tie things together and not just make it about, oh, this character doing this, but why does this character do this? And then if you're using it as that tool of, it's got a reference here, now you can go and check the references and see why that applies to this card.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, you only get as deep into that stuff of it and using it as a ministry or a learning thing or, choosing to do that. You get as deep as you want to. You can play it and not go that route and whatever, but knowing that it's there on the card and then that it showcases where scripture refers back to itself and just the layers of, if you want to get deep into that story and find out about that character, you can.
And there are absolutely things I know scripturally that I probably would not be as aware of if it wasn't for the Game of Redemption.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Where was the pit that Joseph was thrown into? Well, it's in Dothan.
Yeah.
How do you know that? Well, there's a card called Pit of Dothan.
Yeah, and then there's like Saf. Who is Saf? Who is Ish Benabob and his spear?
Who's Bob Ish? Who is that?
Yeah.
Then a guy that's kind of Bob? No. Yeah, did you know Goliath had brothers? I know their names.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty funny.
So I guess along that same vein of you pushing for things, and you said you kind of would throw crazy stuff, and we've mentioned that you were involved with Majestic Heavens, and Gabe actually mentioned to me when I reached out to him and asked him for some help, having a direction for how to prepare for this, but he said that you were one of the people, or the person pushing really big for tokens in the game, and that it came in kind of late on Cloud of Witness, and it was tabled for the Block of Christ set, and then they released that with GOC, which was the latest set that's released to this date until Nationals, when the new set will come out. But tokens have been involved in the game. Majestic Heavens was kind of like a test per se.
Yes.
To see how the community would like it. And I guess there was not complaints. The community was okay with it. And then now it's full force. Like, we're creating tokens in the game, and it's kind of a new design space for the game. So
yes.
What was it like coming up with that idea and wanting to do that? And I'm guessing that that's probably something where you looked at it at other card games and you were like, oh, we could do that here. And that's where you kind of learn from our peers, so to speak.
Absolutely. Well, it comes from two places. One, it was definitely learning from the peers, going, okay, tokens are something that, one, they don't have to be official cards. So it opens up the opportunity for other people to create special tokens that they could distribute with their stuff. So from a Three Lions perspective, it was Three Lions can print tokens if we have tokens, and we can give them away with our orders. And so there'll be Three Lions tokens floating around in the gaming community. But it was also, I hate Soul Drought. I hate Soul Drought so much. It is so annoying to me when you can, like, you could, if you could, but you can't because there's nothing available. And I thought that tokens could be a way to produce souls in gameplay without messing with the ratios in people's decks, because they are produced, and then if they don't exist any longer, they don't exist any longer. They don't get shuffled back in because they're not real cards.
Right.
So it doesn't mess with the legality of the deck, but it still gives the opportunity to address things like Soul Drought. That was my main thrust in tokens, was creating soul tokens. But I love I was looking at the Roots page in, the Church of Christ and Harvest tokens that they have there, where there's tokens that are believers, which was one of those things that we had talked about, which I think is so cool. But they've done Heavenly Harvest, or Heavenly Host rather, with angel tokens, and the accumulator with the demon tokens, proselyte tokens. I mean, there's
a token for everybody out there.
There's a token for anybody who wants a token. And it's not just a token gesture. I'm sorry, I had to say it. If I didn't throw a pun in here, they'd be like, I don't know if that was actually Travis or if that was just AI Travis.
Well, we do live in a simulation here.
Yeah, evidently. But yeah, really my motivation was more towards the lost soul generation side of it. And that also comes from, I've tinkered so much with different play styles and, type 3 or type whatever, like, how like on that part of the message boards where people are coming up with different kinds of play styles and they type it with different numbers and letters and they come up with different things they could do. I did a buy the book thing one time. Matter of fact, I think I have it sitting here, but it's I know we're not doing a video podcast, but it's just a little book that actually has like individual sleeves in it, and the whole idea was that you would create a deck that would go into a book, and that you would interact with the book, but you wouldn't actually take the cards out. It would be where you are in the book, which gives you like the ability to play certain things. So I was always tinkering with stuff like that, always trying to find new ways to play the game. And so it partly came from that too. Like I always want to try, like I'm also in my mind, I don't know if it's reality, but I'm a game designer at heart. Like I always want to be trying to make something. And so Redemption gave me an outlet for that, because you can always be making a new deck.
Yeah.
But I wasn't necessarily satisfied with just making new decks. I was like trying to make new styles of play. And
well, that's fair. As much strategy as the game has in it, there should be as many different play styles. So
yeah,
trying to come up with something new with the card pool and maybe bringing in something new like tokens or something, right, something big like that keeps the game fresh. So all that's good for the community as a whole.
Yeah. That's where the cube came from. That's where junk draft came from. I don't even know if that's still a thing, if they're still in junk draft at Nationals as a side event, but
they do garbage sealed is what they call it.
That's what it is. Garbage sealed. That's what it was called.
But junk draft sounds just as good.
I told you it's a blur. Yeah. Garbage sealed, where you get your 2 blue packs and your 2 green packs, or 3 green packs and 3 blue packs.
And you hope for a big body.
And you may, that's exactly right. You hope for a big body and matching brigades.
Yeah.
And something with a special ability, perhaps.
Hey, let's not get crazy, though. I guess
good times.
At the time that you stepped away, I believe the set that had most recently came out was Prophecy of Christ, and Lineage of
POC,
Christ
yep.
was in development. But that came
Yeah.
out a little bit later due to COVID and things kind of wrecking the timeline for it, if you will.
Right.
But within LOC was kind of these characters that they were lesser known characters in the Bible, a lot of them.
Oh man, that was so much fun.
And they have subtitles. They have,
Yes, they do.
like Jared the Beholder, and there was Adam the Exile, and then Adam, whatever his name is, Noah the Righteous, and all kinds of different titles. And with the flip characters, they get 2 titles, and all of those, you were a big influence on those, and all of that gets to come from, I guess, maybe you nerding out with your Bible knowledge or whatever, and getting to use that in the game. And that's really cool. And it also gives kind of context of who these people were on the card without even, then you get to go to the scripture and find out more if you do that.
Yeah.
But how cool was that? I can tell from your reaction you really enjoyed doing that, and that's probably one of your favorite things that you've done. But just take us through getting to do that and what that was like for you.
Well, it was about the etymology of the name, especially with Hebrew names. There's so much story just in the name itself. And so the names reflected character, names reflected actions. And so like you said, like, you know, you go to a name and you go, okay, what's the Hebrew? What does that mean? And that's not always a great way to do Bible study. like to go and try to dig to all the deeper meaning of each of the letters and go, okay, so this is what this means. But when you're talking about a name and you're talking about trying to capture who someone is in one line, and part of that line has to be their name. You can go to the etymology and go, okay, this is who this person is based on what this name means. Then you can go look at the text and go, okay, does the text reflect that? Because I don't want to be unfair to the person. You know, this is a real person who really lives at a certain time and place. So I don't want to be unfair to them. At the same time, if the etymology matches with their story, it makes sense. You might as well go with it. And it really kind of, for lack of better terms, it really paints a picture of who the person is. And so that was just a ton of fun. When that task got divvied out, I was like, ooh. I'll do it.
And I bet no one fought you for it, did they?
Well, no, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, there's a lot of guys in there that really love the scriptures. And one of the things I loved about that group is it was such an ecumenical group. Like, people from all kinds of backgrounds. I was the only Church of Christ guy in that group. Okay. There were people from all different faith backgrounds in that group, and we were working together, and they love the scriptures. And so there were times where I would say, you know, I think this guy's name should be this, and then someone was chime in and go, well, I don't know if I agree with that based on this, and we would go to the text. You know, and I'm not going to say that like every card design meeting turned into a Bible study, but there were times where, especially stuff like that, where you're trying to just convey a very specific idea about a person. There were times where we had some pretty in-depth discussions, or, you know, you may not think that when we create a card that we're thinking theologically, but we really are. We're trying to convey something that is both theologically accurate, but at the same time ecumenical, in the sense that it's not going to offend a particular group or a particular perspective, which is tricky. It's really hard. I mean, you have Rob is Catholic. There's some folks in the group who are Catholic. There's folks that are Protestant, different kinds of Protestants, and we're all working together as a body and trying to produce something that reflects the truth of Scripture, truth of God's Word, in a way that is Christ-like, both in between our interaction with one another and in the way that we're portraying that to everyone else. So I mean, they knew I loved that kind of stuff. So I don't think anyone was going to be like, no, I want it. But
I think that's where I was going with, because I did it from talking to them, and I've had, you know, several of them on and multiple times on the podcast. It just seems like they like to find what someone's good at or what they enjoy and let them take that.
Yes.
And if you're like jumping up in a meeting or whatever, you're like, hey, I want to do that. I want to do that. I just don't see anybody being like, no, we're going to go a different direction. I feel like they would just hands off. Yeah, you got that, big dog.
Travis, you're weird. We're not letting you do that.
Yeah. So that's kind of more where I was like, no one fought you for it, did they?
No, but they were certainly invested in it for sure. They were, and I don't remember any specific examples off the top of my head, but there were a couple where I came back and I said, I think this would make sense. And they're like, I don't know if that's the most flattering way to say that.
Yeah. So I guess let me ask you about, while you were part of the design team, was there a specific area of scripture that you wanted to, or that you were looking forward to getting to touch on with the game? Or was there something that maybe was done before you were on the team and you were like, I can't wait till we revisit that?
Right. I had a deck at one point. This is another one of those weird decks that I created called Books of the Bible deck. There was one card from every book of the Bible.
I love the names of them that are just so literal.
Yeah. And so, there were books that didn't have any cards in them. And I don't know if that's still true now or not, but at the time, there were books that didn't have any cards that were represented in any set anywhere. And so I really wanted to, I don't know if I pushed for that with anything. I know I was definitely wanting an Old Testament lost soul that was meek.
Hey, there we go. Daniel Meek Soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was really wanting that, but I was told no. I don't know if that's a thing now.
It is a thing now.
It is?
It is a thing. There's a Daniel Meek Lost Soul. It was a promo. At one point, they thought about making it an ultra rare because of the impact that they thought it would have.
Wait, was it that set? Was it Line of Christ that it came out in?
I think it came out in the time leading up to Lineage of Christ, but not as part of the set. It was an outside of a set promo, kind of like a seasonal promo, I believe.
Huh. I must have missed that.
There's something specific about the artwork. It's not full art. It's still got the white border,
right?
But I don't think it's got the two different boxes around the art, where the art's in one box and then the text ability. I think it's just the whole art is filling the lost soul, and then you have like the text box that says meek lost soul or meek, no ability.
Yeah.
But those are in the game now, and then we've had several other meek souls.
So, but I guess to go back and answer your question, there wasn't really anything in particular that I was jonesing to research for the game. I've always been a lover of the Old Testament and how there is that connection, which is part of the reason why I push for the kind of the dual Testament references. I've always loved that. So, I mean, I guess if I were to pinpoint something, that would probably be it, would be just trying to push for those things. And even sometimes, there's sometimes a debate as to whether or not that is an actual quote or is it just an illusion, and how far do we want to go? Do we want to allow illusions to be dual testament, or,
Yeah, I ran into that with my create a card, because Jeremy won another category at Nationals. Each category got to create a card. I got the one for teams. Yes. And they obviously, due to some other issues with other player created cards to where power creep got involved, they kind of watered them down a little bit to say you've got to make a character or an enhancement, and it's going to be on like super simple terms, not doing a lot of things. And I wanted an enhancement for Genesis because they're kind of weak on enhancements, especially in rotation. Like you can ban big numbers and then you've got negates, but you don't have battle winners per se. And I wanted to create one that was called like Days of Noah, because Jesus is talking to the disciples and he's like, as it was in the days of Noah, no one was aware. And then it happened, the flood came or whatever. And I wanted one that like interrupt the battle and then go and play the flood or play a new beginning or something like that. But it wasn't a direct quote. And then because he was talking to the disciples based on the way that card design's working now, it would have been a purple enhancement, not blue. So it wouldn't have helped me out much. So I went in a different direction for the card design. But I did try to do the whole dual testament reference there. And because they're so protective of making sure that it's like a direct quote, that was a no-go.
Yeah. Yep. Which it might seem silly, but it really is kind of you just have to set the parameter and run with it. Yeah.
And obviously with the source material that we're using, trying to do that in the most respectful way and honor the
Absolutely.
sense of what that was written for, and was it intended to be used that way. And
Right.
if you'll misquote it for a game's purpose, you'll misquote it for anything else. So
Right.
I guess it's good that we have those standards in place.
Yes, absolutely.
So I guess you mentioned earlier, and we're getting ready to wrap up. This is kind of the last big thing that I want to ask about is you mentioned that cube that you worked on for having a
Yeah.
cube draft. What
Yes.
all can you tell us about the development of that? Because I went back and read the article, and it was evident how passionate you were about creating that. And when you talk about, like, you can get a sense of passion from you when you talk about these weird decks that you used to build and just trying to think outside of the box. And that wasn't a thing where you were able to think outside of the box and do your own thing to try to help the community and give them something they didn't have before. So what all went into that, and what do you remember about developing that? Okay. So you guys can't see it on the podcast, but apparently he has the cube.
I have it, and I've been looking through it because you asked several questions about it, and so I had to go back and look at it. But one of the things I wanted to do was to create something that was reproducible and reusable. So it's not just like I put the list out there because everybody has cards, and so a group can get together and put them together into a cube, and then they can have that draft experience or sealed, however they want to do it, over and over again without, and so I guess this is a side where I wasn't quite that business savvy, without having to spend any money. Like, you can continue to draft. You don't have to go buy packs.
And that's why you had to sell the business back to Ken.
I had to sell because I was like, I'm terrible at business. No, because that experience is something that, as a playgroup leader, it's hard to reproduce the draft experience without just busting new packs over and over again. Well, the cube allows you to kind of teach how to draft without breaking new packs all the time, too. So you can sit down with a group of new players and go, okay, so when we're drafting, and it's one thing to say it to somebody, but it's another to pick up the stack of cards that they drafted after they're done and go, okay, where are our characters? We don't have any, do we? Why don't we have any characters? Well, it's because you saw all these cool, shiny enhancements, and you saw all these but we don't have any characters. So you can't win a game if you don't have characters. And so it was a teaching thing, too. It was a teaching tool to be able to go, this is how you draft, and this is what it looks like. And we can reproduce it. We can do it over and over again. And there's really cool cards in here. There's powerful cards, but they're not like the most powerful cards. They're cards that you're going to see in a draft sometimes, where you're going to go, here's a card. It's not immediately obvious how it's going to help me win, but how can I become more creative with how I use stuff in an environment that is not set, that you don't know what's coming? And so doing that was, and again, that was directly related to my experience at Gym City Games. Was we had a group of people that came in and drafted all the time. Well, they would come and draft, and they would buy packs and draft, but then they would hang out afterwards, and someone would play Commander, and someone would do these other things, but other people still wanted to draft, and so they started talking about cubes, and I started looking it up, and we created a cube for the store of Magic cards that people would then borrow, and they would hang out. And for a brick and mortar, it actually made sense because more people hang out, they're going to buy another drink, they're going to buy another soda, they're going to buy something to eat. They may see a card in the cube. They go, oh, that's really cool. I forgot that card existed. Do you guys have any of those in stock? And I say, oh yeah, here we have one. You want it? And so it was kind of a way to, from a business side, from a brick and mortar, it made sense. I did update it. I think I'm in that thread on the message boards that talks about the cube. It said that I was updating it, but I hadn't put the information up from updating it, which is true. It was updated again since the list. Here's the thing. I don't think that I'm super clever when it comes to that. I think anybody can create a cube. And I think right now especially is a good time to do it because I don't know if draft is going to be affected by the new, the rotation thing, especially if the new packs coming out are going to start to be all new cards. But you could prepare for that. You could take some of the old stuff that you're not going to maybe use as much anymore and create a cube like a retro, like a remember back when kind of cube. There's all kinds of fun stuff you can do with that. And all it takes is a little bit of time and creativity and come up with your own thing. And like I said, I put my list out not because necessarily it was like, hey, you guys should, do it the way I do it. Matter of fact, I asked a lot of questions as I did the cube because I wanted the community to help me think it through. And I will say that the dual cards that are like, some of them are like dual enhancements, some of them are like character and enhancements. Those are a nightmare when you have such OCD when it comes to that kind of stuff, because I want everything to be balanced.
Yeah.
And so now I'm having to go, okay, that card counts as an artifact, but it also counts as an evil character. It's like, okay, I need to sit it down and walk away for a while.
That's how I felt when I was organizing my boxes when I first got into the game. And I was like, where do I put this at? Because I've got all of these different, like I've got everything labeled, like this row is this card type.
Yep.
And I was like, so I just settled on whatever comes first, unless it's like a covenant or a curse. But if it's like one of those evil characters and an enhancement, that would drive me nuts. I default to whatever I think it comes first as an identity. Like I see Leviathan as an evil character, not an enhancement. Yeah. So I put it with evil characters. Behemoth the same way. But stuff like that, and it's just, I could definitely see that causing issues when you're trying to maintain an exact number of this.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah. So maybe that's why I abandoned continuing to update it. I was like, I don't want to have to deal with this anymore. But no, I think it's worthwhile. I think it's something that is, people can do for their own play group.
Kind of in that same spirit of trying to make sure things are balanced and whatnot for drafting, for the experience of drafting. That's kind of the spirit that Roots is being done in, is that they're making those cards with the idea that these are going to be the main heart of booster draft in the future, to make sure that they kind of line up with that. They're streamlined, simple wording. It's not all the I guess gray area that some of those cards. At Mr. Classic, for example, I got Jerusalem Tower and got Herd because it didn't work the way that I thought it did. So, and John Early was happy to do it to me, but I didn't know that card would work out. I read it and I thought it would play a certain way, and turns out it didn't play. Right. Once you put it in territory, you're just stuck, homie.
Yep.
So I was stuck, and that's one of those things to where now my experience is skewed because of that interaction, because I didn't understand that card. And if you can clean up even just the wording, which is, what Roots is going to bring by having those filler cards in the back of the pack be more streamlined and in line with what the new sets are, the drafting experience should improve overall. But that's kind of, like what you were doing with your cube, is kind of making sure that things are balanced and making sure that there's a positive drafting experience. Unless you, like you said, just don't draft characters, or you draft all evil characters because you're like, well, I have to block. Well, now how do you rescue? I don't know.
Exactly. No, I love. I was noticing the Roots there, the Lost Souls card is now no longer incredibly problematic, but that it creates a token. Yeah, which is beautiful.
There you go. That's your impact on the game.
Beautiful. I love it.
So, speaking of impact, I guess we've talked about several areas now. We've gone through just about all the hats that you wore within the community. And I'm sure there's different things that you did to impact, even if it was just your local play group or some of the extra work you put into maybe those national tournaments that maybe hasn't, come to public eye. So not that we've got a full, encompassing, this is what you brought to the game. But out of the things that we know and that we've discussed tonight, what are you most proud of looking back? When you think about your time with the game, what is the thing that gives you the most pride, knowing that you had a hand in? It's a loaded question, I know.
It is easy. It would be really easy to go to a stuff answer, like this card or this event or this award. Not that I had hardly any of those, but just honestly, it's the relationships You've seen my message board's name, right? Youth
Yep.
minister,
With
but there's a
UTH.
bracket. There's a bracket at the end, BR. BR is the name, the initials of a guy. One of the first guys I met playing Redemption, his name was Brian Reed. Fellow youth minister, lived in Indiana, which is why I kind of perked up when you mentioned that YTG is now in Indiana. But Brian Reed was a quality human being whose life was cut short because of a car accident. He was the White Ranger on the message boards way back in the day. But, the value that has taught me to place on relationships, knowing that you never know. Well, you see him at one event, and then you find out that there was a car accident. He's not with us anymore. And the thing I put most value in my time with the Redemption community is just that those relationships, the knowing that there are people in this world that I could call if I need to talk, and that they would, without judgment, listen. That there are people that if I was just showed up in Alabama, that I would probably have a place to stay with Jay if I needed it. To know that not very many hours away, I have a brother who I love very much in Roy that means the world to me. That I don't know. That's really where it all lies. Is if I had never. So here's where I started. I was with my youth group at a Christian concert thing at Kings Island in Cincinnati, and David Easterling had a booth, a World Vision booth set up, and he was selling redemption cards. And I walked over, and I thought, that's kind of cool. I'd played Magic growing up. It's kind of neat looking. He had some Warriors packs sitting there, so I bought a few. And it's funny that you mentioned that, like, the guy you were talking about bought some cards and then it kind of sat on the side for a while.
Yeah.
Opened them up later and was like, oh, you know what? This is really cool. And then started to get into it. It's exactly what happened to me. It was almost like a seed. Like you plant it at the house and then eventually it grows. You're like, you know what? I think I'm going to try that. But what that launched in my life is it's not about owning a store. It's not about creating a card. It's not about any of that. It's about the community. It's about the relationships. It's about just being a part of something. And it's honestly something that I miss, that I've not been a part of in a while. So that's, all that to say, it means a lot, but I haven't really shown that to be true much lately with my connection. So,
well, I guess wrapped up in that is, I mentioned that I asked on the Discord, which is, where we all communicate now. The boards is kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit. Like it gets updated every now and then, but it's not as active as it was, the Discord.
Right.
And when I asked, is there anything specific you guys want me to ask Travis? You know what the question was. It's the last question here.
I do.
It's the question of, is there any chance that we ever see you back in the game? But it wasn't even like, hey, ask him if he's coming back. It's just like, ask him when he's coming back.
Right.
And it's like, it's
not if, it's when.
Yeah, it's, and Roy always says, you mentioned Roy, and
always keep a starter deck.
Always keep a starter deck, but it's always like players don't leave. They just go on hiatus and then they will return. So I got to ask you, it's clear that, you're still impacted by your time with the game, and obviously the game's still impacted from your time with it. But is there any chance we see you back involved in the community?
Probably not in the way that I have been in the past. I don't know. I find sometimes that I too often try to cling to the past, try to recreate what it was. And so I'm getting older and wiser and knowing that that's not really a smart thing to do. But I have said to Roy a handful of times that if I come, I will not be doing type 1. I will not be doing type 2. I'll just be doing some draft and hanging out and doing some sealed maybe and hanging out. But I would love, I actually, when I was on the message boards, I peeked over at when Nationals was and where it
Yeah.
was, and no surprise, it's in Knoxville.
Yeah, no surprise.
Chris is doing such a good job there. It's a no brainer to keep going back there. But you know, I still our play group here still from time to time asks, so we gonna do anything? And there's a guy that has started coming recently. His name is Thurman, who is a gamer and had never heard of Redemption, and so there's a little bit of a rekindling there of an interest. And to be real honest, like we have the playgroup card still. Like I actually have the binder, like the trade binder for the playgroup here, and it's stacked. I mean, it's got all kinds of good stuff in it. But it's playgroup cards. And so we still have the ability to put stuff together and play. I don't know if we're going to be any good, or we're definitely not going to be up to date. But I think it's a distinct possibility that the church van will make another trip cross country at some point or another. I don't know if it'll be this year, but I do know that my education is probably not over yet either. I'm probably going to continue to pursue some stuff, and that will continue to take a more central role in my life. So, like I said, I don't think it'll be like it has been in the past. I don't see myself having nearly the involvement, but there is definitely an intense and an innate desire to kind of be back and to get to see people and go grab dinner and just enjoy the fellowship. So I'll leave you with a distinct and confident maybe.
Well, that's better than a solid no. But hey,
it's not a hard pass.
You mentioned the playgroup and having stuff that's maybe not up to date. With a new starter deck coming out in just a few weeks, we got update from Your Turn Games that Rob told them in 2 to 3 weeks those things should be available. New starter deck,
okay.
The new set that's going to work directly with the starter deck to tell the story. And the new starter deck's about Israel's deliverance, so it's, It's got David and Goliath, where God delivered his people that way, and then Moses and Pharaoh, kind of retouching those. But then the new set, Israel's Rebellion, is made to work with those starter decks and kind of tell the more fully encompassing story. And The next set after that is going to work with that as well. So it's going to be like a 3-part thing with the starter decks. And it's a really good time to jump back into the game. Like, it's a good, clean launch point. I'm not trying to sell you. I'm just saying if you do get in, $20 gets you that starter deck that Roy said you needed to keep. You might as well get some new packs with roots in the back of it so you get all new cards.
Right.
Just saying. I'm just saying It's a good time to get in the game.
And I might as well go ahead and pick up one of those foil Son of God cards.
Yeah, you might as well come try to get your hands on one of those. And you've already got a new podcast to listen to, so there you go. Right.
Man, I'm a fan of what you're doing. This is really cool.
Yeah, and you're on episode number 60. So
excellent.
My fear when I started was that I was gonna do it for a little bit, and it was gonna be like a lot of things that in the past. Not trying to knock anyone else, but there's a lot of things that people have really big ambitions for, and then it kind of falls. Yeah. And I went through that this past fall or winter into like at the end of last year and coming into this year, to where work got really busy and I had a lot of stuff going on and I didn't record. And I'm glad that I picked it back up and just kept going with it. But definitely enjoy being able to be involved with the community on this side. Because like you said, I don't do a lot of winning. I'm in that same boat. But this is a way that I can impact the community, and I enjoy being able to do that.
For sure.
But I guess that's kind of the end of my questions here. So definitely want to thank you for your time. This went a lot longer than I thought it would. So I'm glad you didn't rush me off.
No, it's all good.
But definitely want to thank you for coming on, and hopefully that maybe turns into a solid, like we'll see you at Nationals at somewhere down the road. I mean, Knoxville is pretty close to Texas in redemption terms. It only gets farther away.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Unless Roy tries to host it again.
Yeah.
But I don't see him doing that. So I will say this to you. I don't know if this is gonna make it on the podcast or not, but so one of my prized possessions is a Paul promo card. I don't know if you can.
Yeah.
It's autographed.
I can't see who.
So, I don't know if you're a theology nerd, but you may have heard the name N.T. Wright.
I
NT,
I can't lie to you and say that it rings a bell immediately.
some people it will. NT Wright is one of those. He's one of the more prominent theologians of our time, and he was. There's a place here locally called Lanier Theological Library. It's a place I'd love to go to. It's just incredible. It's free, like to go into this incredibly well-stocked theological library. I feel like 007. Every time you pull up, you call the number, and it's this giant, like, stone wall compound, and you call and you tell them that you're a registered patron, and it goes, it opens, and you can go in.
When you call it a compound, you make it sound like you're doing something dirty.
Okay. I realize I'm in Texas, and when you think compound in Texas, it's not a great thing. It's not like Waco. We're in Houston. Man. Anyway. So every once in a while, he'll have theologians come in and give talks, like free to the community. Like all you do is sign up. And so myself and the preacher, and there's a couple other guys that were with us, and we went to listen to NT Wright defend. So he wrote a book about Paul. And so they brought in these other theologians, and they basically, he presented it like a dissertation, and they attacked it. And then he had a chance to defend at the end. And then they had a break, and then you could, once you went out to dinner and stuff, you could come back, and then he gave a talk that night. Well, in between, we're getting ready to go get dinner, and he's walking outside, and I walk over to him, and I say, Mr. Wright, would you be willing to autograph my Paul card?
I got a Paul rookie card that needs a signature.
Oh, yeah, it's his rookie card, yeah. And he looked at me, and with what I can only imagine is confusion mixed with disdain, goes, "What is that?" And I said, "Sir, it is a collectible card game based on the Bible, and this is a Paul card, and I was wondering if you would autograph it for me." And he takes my Sharpie and begins to write his name and shake his head as if he is judging me on the spot, like in the back of his head, "Stupid American Christians." And but I was nerding out because, like, this guy, like, in the theological world, he's a fairly big deal. And he writes a lot of books. I've read a lot of his books, and it was just a really, really funny moment. But this is kind of the litmus test when I show it to somebody. Yeah. If they're like, "Oh, it's a cool card," I know they like cards. If they look at it and go, "Who's the name?" and I tell them NT Wright, and they go, "Whoa," then I know that we're going to have some fun conversations.
So it's kind of, you get to open a door, but it's got a storm door on the front, so it's two avenues that you could go.
Yes. Precisely.
There you go.
Yeah, and then the card behind it is my Yu-Gi-Oh token that I had made when I owned Gem City Games. It's it doesn't see the light of day for obvious reasons, but man, I appreciate you.
Yeah, definitely want to say thank you for your time here. I really do think that this is the type of thing that when I set out to do the podcast, I was like, this is one of the things that would be really cool, like the people that have no longer been involved in the game and be able to showcase them, and not necessarily in a way to just try to like ask you to come back to the game and type of thing that I feel like it could come off sometimes, but more genuinely just kind of be thankful for the impact that people had making this game that lasted long enough. Thankfully, it lasted long enough for 2019 for me to come in contact with it and enjoy it and pick it up and then carry some part of the torch forward.
Yeah.
So for all that impact, definitely want to say thank you.
Well, appreciate you and you doing what you're doing. This is awesome.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for this week's episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed getting to know Travis as we recorded this. Hopefully you guys have some context for who he was and his impact on the game if you were not around during that time. And we're looking forward to next week's episode, and we'll be right back with you. Peace.